Tonight, a woman will destroy the Mafia empire she spent 12 years building. Serafina Moretti stands frozen outside her husband's study, listening to him laugh about how she always comes crawling back. For 12 years, she's been the invisible architect behind Dante Vitale's criminal empire, laundering money, bribing officials, structuring every protection that keeps him untouchable. Tonight, she watches him parade another woman through the gala she personally organized. Tonight, she realizes something terrifying. She doesn't need him anymore. But he needs her desperately, and she's about to prove it. Follow this story to the end, hit like, and comment your city so I can see how far this tale travels. Rain hammered the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Vitale penthouse like bullets against bulletproof glass. Serafina Moretti stood in the darkened hallway, one hand pressed against Italian marble that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime, the other clutching a dinner reservation she'd made 3 weeks ago for their anniversary. 12 years. 12 years of marriage had taught her to read Dante Vitale's voice the way a safecracker reads tumblers. She knew the cold business tone he used when ordering executions. She knew the charming public mask he wore for politicians and federal judges. She knew the dangerous whisper that came right before violence, the one that made grown men wet themselves. But tonight, through the crack in his study door, she heard something worse. Dismissal. "She's emotional," Dante said, his laugh easy and cruel. Serafina always comes crawling back. Always has. Ice water flooded Serafina's veins. "Your wife's a saint, boss," Marco's voice, Dante's underboss, a man whose teeth Serafina had personally paid to fix after a rival crew shattered his jaw. "Putting up with your shit for this long." "She's useful," Dante corrected, the sound of whiskey pouring into crystal. "That's what matters. She handles the boring shit, charity events, legal paperwork, making us look legitimate. Frees me up for real work." More laughter. "Useful." Serafina looked down at the reservation card in her hand. Le Bernardin. Table for two. 7:30. She'd requested the corner table where they'd celebrated their engagement, back when Dante still looked at her like she was something precious instead of convenient. She walked to the hallway mirror, an antique piece she'd sourced from an estate sale in Florence. Her reflection stared back. Flawless black silk gown, diamond earrings that caught the light like trapped stars, hair swept up in the elegant style Dante preferred. The perfect Mafia wife, invisible. She'd become a ghost in her own home. A beautiful, useful ghost. Serafina pulled out her phone and canceled the reservation with 3 taps. Then she walked to the master bedroom, locked the door, and opened her laptop. For the next 4 hours, while rain drowned the city and Dante drank himself stupid with Marco, Serafina worked. The annual Vitale Foundation Gala was scheduled for Saturday night at the Sinclair Ballroom. 12,000 square feet of old money elegance wrapped in gold leaf and crystal. Serafina had planned every detail herself, the way she'd planned every public event for the Vitale family since marrying into the organization. Guest list. Approved. Seating chart. Optimized to keep rival families separated while placing federal informants where they could be monitored. Menu. Designed to impress the mayor and his wife. Security. Coordinated with 3 separate teams to ensure no embarrassing incidents. She did this work because Dante called it boring shit, because he was too busy running protection rackets and smuggling operations to understand that his empire survived on appearances. On legitimacy, on the intricate web of legal structures and social connections that kept federal prosecutors at bay, Serafina understood. She'd been understanding for 12 years. Saturday arrived with crisp autumn air and clear skies. Serafina spent the afternoon at the ballroom, personally inspecting table arrangements and lighting cues. Her assistant, Maya, followed with a tablet, checking off items. Champagne arrived? Yes, Mrs. Vitale. Photographer briefed on which guests to avoid. Confirmed. Audio system tested? Twice. Serafina nodded, scanning the ballroom one final time. Everything perfect. Everything controlled. This gala raised millions for children's hospitals and domestic violence shelters, legitimate charity work that bought enormous goodwill with law enforcement and politicians. It was her masterpiece, repeated annually. At 6 o'clock, she returned home to dress. Dante wasn't there. She tried calling, voicemail. She texted. No response. By 7, a cold dread settled in her stomach. By 7:30, when the first guests began arriving, she stood alone at the ballroom entrance in a crimson silk gown that hugged every curve, greeting donors and celebrities with a smile that felt carved from ice. "Where's Dante?" Senator Mitchell asked, pumping her hand. "Running late," Serafina said smoothly. "Business." "Always working, that man," the senator laughed. "Always." By 8 o'clock, 300 guests filled the ballroom. Champagne flowed. A string quartet played Vivaldi. Serafina moved through the crowd like a dancer executing choreography she'd memorized, making small talk, accepting compliments, ensuring everything ran flawlessly. Then the main doors opened. Dante walked in. With another woman on his arm, time fractured into sharp-edged pieces. Serafina watched her husband cross the ballroom threshold wearing his best Tom Ford suit, smiling that dangerous smile she knew so well. The woman beside him was young, mid-20s, platinum blonde, poured into a gold dress that probably cost more than the average car. And around her neck, diamonds. The necklace Serafina had admired in a jewelry store window 4 weeks ago, the one Dante had called excessive and unnecessary, now wrapped around another woman's throat. The ballroom didn't stop. Conversations continued, glasses clinked, the quartet played on, but Serafina felt every eye in the room slide toward her, then quickly away. Pity disguised as discretion. Dante saw her. Their eyes met across 50 feet of polished marble. He smiled. Not apologetic. Not guilty. Amused. The woman, she had a name, Serafina would learn later, Vivian Cross, daughter of a shipping magnate, professional socialite, leaned into Dante and whispered something. He laughed, loud enough to carry. Serafina's fingernails cut half-moons into her palms. Maya appeared at her elbow. "Mrs. Vitali, should I—" "Nothing," Serafina said quietly. "Do nothing." She couldn't make a scene. Not here. Not with federal judges and politicians watching. Not with the mayor's wife standing 20 feet away, already whispering to her assistant. So Serafina did what she'd been trained to do for 12 years. She smiled. She moved through the crowd. She gave her prepared speech about the foundation's work, her voice steady and warm, while Dante and Vivian sat at a table in the back, his hand resting possessively on the small of the other woman's back. She watched them dance during the orchestra set, watched Vivienne kiss Dante's cheek while cameras flashed, watched her husband parade his mistress through the event his wife had spent 3 months organizing. At 11 o'clock, when the gala finally ended and guests began filing out, Dante approached. "Great event," he said, like they were business associates. "Really pulled it together." Serafina looked at him. Really looked. At the man she'd married at 23, when she'd been young enough to believe love conquered everything. At the mob boss who'd promised to protect her, cherish her, build a life with her. "Who is she?" Serafina asked. "Does it matter?" "You brought her to my event." "Our event," Dante corrected. "The Foundation's event. And Vivian's father owns half the shipping companies we use. Good for business." Good for business. Serafina felt something crack inside her chest. Not her heart, that had been breaking slowly for years, something deeper, something structural. "How long?" she asked. Dante shrugged. "Few months." "Serafina, don't be dramatic. You know how this works." "Do I?" "You're my wife. That doesn't change. This is just—" He waved a hand vaguely. "You handle your world, I handle mine." "My world," Serafina repeated softly. "The charity stuff, the social circuit, you're good at it." He checked his watch. "I've got a meeting. Don't wait up." He walked away. Just like that. 12 years of loyalty, and he walked away. Serafina stood alone in the empty ballroom while cleaning crews began breaking down tables around her. Crystal chandeliers reflected in mirrors, reflected in champagne glasses, reflected into infinite copies of herself, all standing perfectly still, all abandoned. Maya approached cautiously. "Mrs. Vitali, do you need anything?" "A car," Serafina said, "and my laptop." The Plaza Hotel penthouse suite overlooked Central Park. Serafina checked in under her maiden name, Moretti, and tipped the bellhop $200 for discretion. Then she locked the door, poured herself a vodka she didn't drink, and opened her laptop. For a moment, she just sat there, staring at the screen. 12 years. She'd met Dante at a gallery opening in Soho. She'd been finishing her MBA at Columbia, working part-time at her father's accounting firm. He'd been young, dangerous, magnetic, everything her careful, structured life wasn't. He'd made her feel alive. They'd married 6 months later in a ceremony that made the society pages. Serafina had known what she was marrying into. The Vitali family wasn't subtle about their business. But Dante had promised her partnership, had promised she'd be more than just a wife. And she had been more. She'd been the architect. While Dante ran the street-level operations, the protection rackets, the smuggling, the enforcement, Serafina had built the infrastructure that made it all work. She'd structured the shell corporations that hid dirty money. She'd created the offshore accounts in Zurich and Panama. She'd established the legitimate businesses that served as fronts. She'd cultivated relationships with lawyers, accountants, politicians. She'd made the Vitali empire untouchable. And Dante called it boring shit. Serafina pulled up a folder labeled Infrastructure and began scrolling through files. 12 years of work. Hundreds of documents. Every legal protection, every financial structure, every carefully constructed barrier between the Vitali family and federal prosecution. All of it designed by her. All of it controlled by her. She pulled up another folder, Personal Holdings. This one Dante had never seen, because while Serafina had been building his empire, she'd also been building her own, quietly, patiently, invisibly. It had started small. Real estate investments made under her maiden name, then luxury property acquisitions, then hotel developments, all legitimate, all carefully documented, all structured to be completely separate from Vitali family assets. Dante thought she spent her days planning charity events. She'd been building a fortune. Serafina opened a new document and began typing. By sunrise, she'd drafted a comprehensive plan. By Monday morning, she'd started executing it. Marco Santoro woke at 6 a.m. to his phone exploding with notifications. What the fuck, he muttered, squinting at the screen. 17 missed calls from Dante. 32 texts from other capos. Emergency messages from lawyers, accountants, business partners. He called Dante back. Get to the office, Dante said without preamble. Now. Marco made it to the Vitali headquarters in Red Hook within 40 minutes. The office, disguised as an import-export firm, was chaos. Men shouted into phones. Computers glowed with urgent emails. Dante stood at the window, still wearing last night's clothes, his jaw tight enough to crack teeth. Boss, what's... The shell corporations are gone, Dante said flatly. Marco blinked. What? Dissolved, overnight. Every single entity we use for laundering just disappeared from corporate registries. That's not possible. Tell that to our fucking lawyers. Dante turned, his eyes were bloodshot. Offshore accounts are frozen. The Swiss bank is asking for documentation we don't have. Panama's the same. Dubai's not returning calls. How? The warehouses in Newark got hit with city code violations this morning. All of them, simultaneously. They're being shut down for safety inspections. Marco's stomach dropped. That's federal. Has to be. The feds don't know about those warehouses, Dante said. We've kept them off the radar for 8 years. Then who? Serafina. The name dropped into the room like a grenade. Marco stared. Your wife? Who else? Dante's voice was rising. She set up every corporate structure. She managed every account. She knew where everything was hidden. Why would she? Because I'm a fucking idiot, Dante said quietly. Bashakam. Serafina woke at noon in the Plaza suite, ordered room service, and made 17 phone calls. By the end of the day, 3 more Vitali legitimate businesses had their operating licenses suspended pending financial audits. 2 high-profile lawyers had withdrawn from representing the organization, citing conflicts of interest that hadn't existed 24 hours earlier. A shipping contract worth $12 million had been terminated due to irregularities in corporate documentation. The irregularities were real. Serafina had inserted them years ago as insurance. Now she was activating every failsafe, every trapdoor, every pressure point she'd built into Dante's empire. Her phone rang. Dante. She let it go to voicemail. He called again. 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 On the seventh call, she answered. What did you do? Dante's voice was raw. I withdrew my support, Serafina said calmly. You're destroying everything. I'm removing the foundation I built. If your empire can't stand without me holding it up, that's not my problem. Serafina, listen. No, she said. You listen. For 12 years, I made you untouchable. I structured every protection. I managed every risk. I built the system that let you play gangster without consequences. You're my wife. I was useful, Serafina corrected, throwing his words back at him. Remember? That's what you called me. Useful. Good at the boring shit. Silence. Where are you? Dante asked. Somewhere safe. We need to talk. We are talking. Face to face, please. The please almost broke her. Almost. She'd spent 12 years responding to that tone, to the rare moments when Dante let his guard down and showed her the man beneath the monster. No, she said. Serafina, I'll be in touch when I'm ready. She hung up. Then she blocked his number and went back to work. Mas. Over the next week, the Vitali Empire hemorrhaged. Federal investigators launched audits on 3 separate fronts. Political allies stopped returning calls. Business partners began distancing themselves, spooked by the sudden attention from law enforcement. Serafina watched it all unfold from her hotel suite while simultaneously managing her own business interests. She had meetings with architects about a new hotel development in Boston. She negotiated the purchase of a luxury resort in Miami. She reviewed investment portfolios with financial advisors who had no idea she'd spent the last decade married to organized crime. On Thursday, her former college roommate, Alessia Vale, arrived at the plaza with champagne and Thai food. Okay, Alessia said, kicking off her heels and sprawling on the couch. Explain to me how you secretly became a real estate mogul while married to the Mafia. Serafina smiled. Carefully. Seriously, I knew you were smart, but this... Alessia gestured at the financial document spread across the coffee table. You're worth how much? Enough. That's not an answer. 240 million, Serafina said. Give or take. Alessia choked on her champagne. What? Legitimate holdings, hotels, commercial properties, residential developments, all acquired over the past 10 years. All registered under Moretti Holdings, which is a private company controlled entirely by me. How did Dante not know? He wasn't paying attention, Serafina said simply. He thought I spent my days planning parties and shopping. He never bothered to look deeper. Men, Alessia muttered. Powerful men especially, Serafina agreed. They assume their wives exist to support them. It never occurs to them that we might be building something separate, something better. Alicia studied her friend. You planned this. Not this specifically, but I knew eventually I'd need an exit strategy. Serafina poured more champagne. When I married Dante, I was young enough to believe love would be enough. By year 3, I realized I needed insurance. By year 5, I was actively building it. And now? Now I'm free. The word tasted strange, foreign. Serafina rolled it around in her mouth like expensive wine. Free. For 12 years, she'd been Mrs. Dante Vitali, the Mafia wife, the perfect hostess, the invisible architect. She'd molded herself into whatever shape Dante needed, sacrificing her own ambitions to build his. No more. What's your next move? Alicia asked. Serafina smiled. I'm going to make sure he understands exactly what he lost. Dante finally found her on a Tuesday afternoon, not hiding in some safe house, not cowering in a hotel room, but sitting at the head of a polished conference table on the 42nd floor of Moretti International Tower in Tribeca, a gleaming glass building with her family name etched in chrome above the entrance. Dante stood in the doorway of the conference room, flanked by 2 of his men, staring at a woman he barely recognized. Serafina wore a tailored ivory suit that probably cost $5,000. Her hair fell in loose waves past her shoulders, the natural style she preferred, not the rigid updo Dante had always insisted on. Behind her, floor-to-ceiling windows framed the Manhattan skyline like she owned it. Maybe she did. Hello, Dante, she said calmly. He dismissed his men with a gesture and entered the room, closing the door behind him. What is this? My office. Your... He looked around, taking in the expensive furniture, the modern art on the walls, the view that costs millions per square foot. How? I built a company, Serafina said, while you were building yours. The difference is mine's legitimate. Dante's face darkened. You used my money. No, she said firmly. I used my father's life insurance payout. The money I inherited when he died 3 years into our marriage. Remember? You told me to invest it wisely, so I did. She slid a leather portfolio across the table toward him. That's 12 years of financial records, every dollar accounted for, every investment documented, every acquisition legitimate. You won't find a single connection to Vitali family assets because there isn't one. Dante opened the portfolio, scanning pages with growing disbelief. $240 million, Serafina continued, give or take. In hotels, commercial real estate, and residential developments across 6 states. Moretti Holdings is entirely mine. You have no claim to it, no connection to it, no leverage over it. You've been lying to me for years. No, Serafina said. I've been surviving. There's a difference. Dante slammed the portfolio shut. You're destroying my organization. I'm removing the protections I built. Same thing. Is it? Serafina leaned back in her chair. I spent 12 years making you untouchable, Dante. I structured every shell corporation. I established every offshore account. I created the legal framework that kept federal prosecutors away. I did that work while you called it boring and unimportant. I never said, you said it 3 weeks ago, she interrupted. To Marco, in your study. You said I was useful, that I handled the boring shit, that I always come crawling back. Dante went very still. I heard you, Serafina continued softly. Every word. And I realized something important. You're right. I am useful, extremely useful, which means without me, you're vulnerable. Serafina, you paraded your mistress through the gala I organized, she said, her voice hardening. You gave her the necklace you refused to buy me. You humiliated me in front of 300 people, and then you told me not to be dramatic. Dante opened his mouth, closed it. So here's what's going to happen, Serafina said. You're going to leave this office. You're going to go back to whatever remains of your empire, and you're going to understand that the only reason you had an empire at all is because I built the foundation that held it up. I can fix this, Dante said quietly. Us. I can fix us. There is no us. I'll end things with Vivian. It's not about her, Serafina said. It's about you. About the fact that for 12 years, you looked at me and saw a convenience, a useful tool. You never saw a partner. That's not true. Isn't it? She stood, walking to the window. Name one time you asked me about my dreams, my ambitions, what I wanted beyond being your wife. Silence. You can't, Serafina said, because you never asked. You assumed my entire existence revolved around supporting yours. Dante crossed the room, stopping a few feet behind her. I'm sorry. I know, she said. And in 6 months, when the federal indictments start coming down, you'll be even sorrier, because every protection I built is gone now. Every trap door I installed to hide your activities has been sealed shut. Your empire is exposed, and there's nothing you can do about it. You'd send me to prison? Serafina turned to face him. I'm not sending you anywhere. I'm simply no longer protecting you. What happens next is the natural consequence of the choices you made. That's the same thing. No, she said quietly. It's worse, because you did this to yourself. She walked past him to the conference room door and opened it. Goodbye, Dante. He didn't move for a long moment. Then, slowly he walked to the door and stopped, looking back at her one final time. I loved you, he said. No, Serafina corrected gently. You loved the idea of me, the perfect wife who made your life easier. You never bothered to find out who I actually was. Dante left without another word. Serafina closed the door behind him and returned to the window, looking out over the city she'd just reclaimed as her own. Her phone buzzed with a message from her attorney. Federal warrant executed on Vitali warehouses. 3 arrests made. More coming. Serafina read the message twice, then deleted it and turned back to her desk. She had an empire to run. A legitimate one. And this time, she was building it for herself. That night, Serafina sat alone in her new penthouse apartment in Tribeca, another property she'd quietly acquired years ago as an escape route. The space was modern and clean, furnished in the minimalist style she preferred when Dante wasn't around to insist on heavy Italian furniture and ostentatious displays of wealth. Her laptop showed real-time news alerts. The Vitali organization was hemorrhaging, arrests accelerating, assets frozen, Dante's carefully constructed empire collapsing under federal pressure. She should feel victorious. Instead, she felt hollow. 12 years of her life, and this was the ending. Not the passionate love story she'd imagined at 23. Not the partnership Dante had promised. Just this. Lawyers and federal agents and the systematic dismantling of everything they'd built together. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer. Then, on impulse, she did. Mrs. Vitali? An unfamiliar female voice. My name is Special Agent Catherine Price with the FBI. I'd like to speak with you about your husband's organization. Serafina's blood went cold. I don't know anything about my husband's business affairs. I think we both know that's not true, Agent Price said pleasantly. You've been the operational architect of the Vitali empire for over a decade. Every corporate structure, every financial instrument, every legal protection. I want a lawyer. You're not under investigation, Mrs. Vitali. We're interested in your husband, not you, and we think you might be interested in protecting yourself. I'm hanging up. Wait, Agent Price said quickly. We know you've been dismantling Vitali assets for the past 2 weeks. We know you have documentation we need, and we know you're vulnerable. Dante's organization is desperate right now. Desperate men make dangerous decisions. Serafina's hand tightened on the phone. We can protect you, Agent Price continued. In exchange for testimony, no, Serafina said firmly. I'm not testifying against anyone. Find your evidence somewhere else. She hung up and immediately called her attorney. Samantha, we have a problem. The federal pressure intensified. Over the next month, 17 members of the Vitali organization were arrested, warehouses raided, assets seized. The empire Dante's father had built over 40 years was being systematically destroyed by investigations Serafina had carefully engineered to trigger. She hadn't meant to bring federal attention, not explicitly, but by removing the legal protection she'd installed by dissolving the shell corporations and freezing the offshore accounts, she'd exposed every vulnerability, made every crime visible. The FBI was simply doing what federal investigators do when someone hands them a gift-wrapped case. Dante called repeatedly from burner phones. She never answered. He sent messages through intermediaries. She ignored them. He showed up at Moretti Tower. Her security team turned him away. Meanwhile, Vivienne Cross disappeared. Serafina learned about it from a news alert. Shipping magnate's daughter vanishes amid federal investigation. She stared at her phone screen for a long time, reading between the lines. Vivienne had either run scared or been moved into protective custody. Either way, she was gone. And Dante was alone. For the first time in weeks, Serafina felt something other than anger. She felt pity. Not for Dante's situation, he'd earned that, but for the man she'd once loved, the one who'd existed beneath the violence and arrogance, the one she'd seen glimpses of in quiet moments, late at night, when his guard was down. That man was disappearing too, buried under federal indictments and betrayal and the consequences of 12 years of choices. Serafina closed her eyes and told herself she'd done the right thing, that she'd simply withdrawn her support, that what happened next wasn't her responsibility. But late at night, alone in her penthouse, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd destroyed more than just an empire. She'd destroyed the last possibility of something better. On a cold November morning, Serafina received an envelope at her office. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Dante standing outside a federal courthouse surrounded by lawyers, looking 10 years older than he had 2 months ago. On the back, someone had written a message in handwriting she didn't recognize. He's going to run. They always do when the walls close in. Watch your back. Serafina turned the photograph over and over in her hands, studying Dante's face. The exhaustion, the fear, the realization that his empire was truly gone. She should feel satisfied. Instead, she felt the first tremor of something that might have been doubt. Because somewhere in the process of reclaiming her power, she'd crossed a line she couldn't uncross. She'd gone from protecting herself to actively destroying someone she'd once loved. And now, according to an anonymous warning, that someone might be desperate enough to strike back. Serafina locked the photograph in her desk drawer and called her head of security. "Double the detail on my apartment," she said, "and run background on everyone who's been in this building for the past month." "Expecting trouble?" "Always," Serafina said, because she'd learned the most important lesson of her marriage. In Dante's world, there were no clean exits, only survival. And the terrible cost of freedom. The security footage showed Dante's car circling Moretti Tower 3 times before finally driving away. Serafina watched the timestamp, 2:47 a.m., and felt her chest tighten. She'd been asleep when he'd shown up, or trying to sleep. Lately, sleep came in fractured pieces, interrupted by sounds that might have been nothing or might have been everything. "He didn't get past the lobby," Marcus Chen said. Her head of security stood beside her desk, arms crossed, watching the same footage on her monitor. Building protocol held. "But Mrs. Vitali, I need to be honest. If he really wants to get to you, a lobby security checkpoint won't stop him." "I know," Serafina said quietly. "We should consider relocating you, at least temporarily." "No." She closed the laptop. "I'm not running. Not from him. Not from anyone." Marcus studied her with the flat, assessing gaze of a man who'd spent 20 years in private security, protecting people who thought they were invincible. Running and surviving aren't the same thing. Neither is hiding and living. "Fair enough." He moved toward the door, then paused. "For what it's worth, you're handling this better than most people would. Most people married to mobsters don't walk away. They stay or they disappear. You built an empire instead." After he left, Serafina sat alone in her office while morning light crawled across the Manhattan skyline. Built an empire. The phrase should have felt triumphant. Instead, it felt like describing a scar as beautiful because at least you survived the knife. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Not about us. About what's coming, please." She stared at the message. Dante's words, almost certainly, from yet another burner phone. She'd blocked 17 numbers in the past month. He kept finding new ones. Her thumb hovered over the delete button. Then she typed back. "Moretti Tower, noon. Come alone." Immediately, she regretted it, but the message was already sent, already delivered, already transforming into a meeting she wasn't sure she wanted and definitely shouldn't have agreed to. She called Marcus. "Dante's coming at noon, conference room. I want 2 men outside the door and 1 monitoring from the security office." "You sure about this?" "No," Serafina admitted, "but I'm doing it anyway." Schwartz. Dante arrived at 11:58 a.m. wearing a coat that looked slept in and eyes that looked like they'd forgotten what rest meant. Serafina watched him enter the building on her security feed, watched him submit to the metal detector, watched him surrender his phone and wallet to the guards. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. Or maybe she'd just gotten used to seeing him from a position of power instead of submission. When he entered the conference room, she was already seated at the head of the table. She'd chosen her position deliberately, the power seat, the one with the view, the one that made visitors feel like supplicants. Dante stopped just inside the doorway. "You look good." "Don't," Serafina said flatly. "Don't what?" "Pretend this is a reunion. You said we needed to talk about what's coming, so talk." He closed the door and moved to the chair across from her, not at her right hand where a partner would sit, but directly opposite. Adversarial positioning. Even now they were negotiating through geography. "Vivian's talking to the feds," Dante said without preamble. Serafina had suspected. Confirmation still hit like cold water. "What does she know?" "Enough." He rubbed his face with both hands. "She was around for 6 months, heard things, saw things, recorded things." "You let her record you?" "I didn't know." His laugh was bitter. "She was wearing a wire, playing me the whole time. The FBI approached her 3 weeks into our relationship, offered her immunity if she cooperated." "When did you find out?" "Yesterday. My lawyer has sources inside the federal prosecutor's office. They're building a RICO case, using her testimony as the foundation." Serafina processed this. RICO. Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, the federal government's favorite weapon against organized crime. If they had enough evidence, they could seize everything Dante owned, arrest everyone he'd ever worked with, and ensure he spent the rest of his life in prison. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because you're exposed too," Dante said. "You built the corporate structures. You established the offshore accounts. Your fingerprints are all over the financial architecture. If Vivian knows enough to put me away, she knows enough to implicate you." Ice flooded Serafina's veins. "I never committed any crimes." "You facilitated mine," Dante said. "That's conspiracy. That's aiding and abetting. That's 20 years minimum if they want to come after you. They won't. I'm not part of your organization. You were married to me for 12 years. You managed our finances. You knew what I was doing and you helped hide it." He leaned forward. "Serafina, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to warn you. The feds are going to offer you a deal. Testify against me in exchange for immunity. And when they do, you need to take it." She stared at him. "You want me to testify against you? I want you safe." His voice cracked slightly. "This is my fault. All of it. The affair, the humiliation, pushing you away. I destroyed us, but I won't let you go to prison because I was too stupid to see what I had." Serafina felt something twist inside her chest. This was the Dante she'd fallen in love with. The one who appeared in rare, unguarded moments. The one capable of putting someone else first. She'd thought he was gone. Maybe he'd just been buried under 12 years of violence and ego. "I'm not testifying," she said quietly. "Why not?" "Because I don't cooperate with federal agents. I don't care what they offer. I'm not sending anyone to prison." "Even me. Especially you." She stood, walking to the window. "You were right earlier. My fingerprints are all over your financial structures. If I testify, I'm admitting I knew everything. I'm confirming I was complicit. That makes me vulnerable to perjury charges if I claim ignorance about anything. It makes me a target." "They'll give you immunity." "Immunity is just a promise," Serafina said. "Promises break. I've spent 12 years learning that lesson." Dante was quiet for a long moment. "So what are you going to do?" "Survive," she said simply. "The same thing I've been doing since I married you." He stood and crossed the room, stopping a few feet behind her. She could see his reflection in the window glass, the exhaustion in his face, the defeat in his posture. This was a man watching his world collapse in real time. "I'm sorry," Dante said, "for everything. For not seeing you. For taking you for granted. For Vivian. For all of it. I know." "If I could go back—" "You can't," Serafina interrupted. "None of us can. We just live with what we've done and try to do better." "Is there any chance—" He stopped. "Never mind." "What?" "Nothing. Stupid question." "Ask it." He met her eyes in the reflection. "Is there any chance you could forgive me? Not now. Maybe not for years, but eventually?" Serafina turned to face him directly. "I don't know. Ask me when we're both still standing after this is over." Dante nodded slowly. Then he did something that shocked her. He reached out and gently squeezed her hand. Just once. A brief connection that felt like goodbye. Then he left. Serafina stood at the window for a long time after, staring at the city below and wondering if she'd just made a terrible mistake. The federal indictments dropped 3 days later like cluster bombs across New York's criminal landscape. 17 members of the Vitali organization were arrested in coordinated dawn raids. The news played the footage on endless loop, men in handcuffs being perp-walked past cameras, shouting lawyers, crying wives. Dante's face appeared in every broadcast, the central figure in a sprawling organized crime operation that had allegedly controlled shipping, smuggling, and protection rackets across the East Coast for 2 decades. Serafina watched from her apartment, coffee growing cold in her hands, as federal agents carried boxes of evidence out of the Vitali penthouse, her former home, the place where she'd spent 12 years building something she thought was a life. Now it was just another crime scene. Her phone exploded with calls from reporters, journalists, media outlets, all wanting comment from the Mafia wife. She ignored them all. Her attorney, Samantha Rodriguez, handled the press with a terse statement. Mrs. Vitali is a private businesswoman with no involvement in or knowledge of the alleged criminal activities described in the indictment. It was carefully worded. legally precise, completely inadequate. Because within hours, the narrative shifted. An investigative journalist from The Times published a profile piece titled "The Woman Who Built the Empire," a detailed examination of Serafina's role in establishing the corporate structures that hid Vitali money. The article stopped just short of accusing her of crimes, but the implication was clear. She knew everything and had been complicit for years. Serafina's phone rang. Samantha. "We have a problem," the attorney said without preamble. "I've seen the article." "It's not just the article. The FBI wants to talk to you. Special Agent Catherine Price called my office an hour ago. They're offering immunity in exchange for cooperation." "I told you my answer." "Serafina, you need to think about this carefully. If you don't cooperate, you become a target. They'll assume you're protecting Dante. They'll look for ways to pressure you." "Let them look." "This isn't a game," Samantha said sharply. "These are federal prosecutors with unlimited resources and political pressure to take down organized crime. If they decide you're an obstacle, they will destroy you." "Then I'll build something new from the rubble," Serafina said. "I've done it before." She hung up before Samantha could argue further. For the rest of the day, Serafina worked. She had conference calls with architects about the Boston hotel development. She reviewed financial projections for the Miami resort. She met with investors interested in backing her expansion into Chicago. She did everything she could to maintain the facade that her world wasn't crumbling at the edges. But that night, alone in her apartment, she finally let the mask crack. She poured herself vodka she actually drank this time and stood at the window looking out over Manhattan. Somewhere out there, Dante was probably in a federal detention center, sleeping on a thin mattress, eating terrible food, facing the reality that his empire was gone. And somewhere out there, federal agents were building a case that might include her. She'd thought she was free. She'd thought destroying Dante's empire and building her own would be enough. But freedom, she was learning, wasn't just about walking away. It was about surviving what came after. The next morning, Marcus appeared in her office with a file folder and a grim expression. "We have a situation," he said, dropping the folder on her desk. Inside were photographs. Serafina, leaving her apartment. Serafina, entering Moretti Tower. Serafina having lunch with Alessia. All taken with a telephoto lens from distance. All time-stamped over the past week. "Someone's surveilling you," Marcus said. Professional job. Multiple angles, different vehicles, rotating teams. I'd guess federal agents, but the methodology doesn't quite match. Who then? Could be Dante's people. Could be rivals looking to see if you're vulnerable. Could be someone else entirely. He pointed to one photograph, Serafina getting into her car. "This one concerns me most. Whoever took it had a clear sightline to your driver's seat. If surveillance turns operational—" "I understand," Serafina said quietly. "We need to increase your security footprint, add counter-surveillance protocols, maybe get you a safe house." "Do it." She studied the photographs, feeling violation crawl across her skin. Someone was watching her, tracking her movements, building a pattern of her life. The question was why. That afternoon, she got her answer. A courier delivered an unmarked envelope to her office. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. "You took everything from him. Now we take everything from you. Watch your empire burn, Mrs. Vitali. Watch everyone you love disappear. Then watch yourself lose everything you built. You have 1 week to make it right. No signature, no demands, just a threat wrapped in vague language that could mean anything or nothing." Serafina read it 3 times, feeling her pulse accelerate. Then she called Marcus. "We have a problem." Bound. Over the next 48 hours, Serafina's world began to fracture in small, precise ways. First, a fire broke out in one of her hotel properties in Boston. Arson investigators ruled it suspicious, but couldn't determine the cause. Damages totaled $2 million and forced the property to close for renovations. Second, 3 major investors in her Miami resort development suddenly withdrew their commitments, citing concerns about recent media attention. Without their backing, the project stalled. Third, the city health department shut down her flagship Manhattan hotel for code violations that appeared overnight in official records. The violations were technical and minor, but the closure cost her $50,000 per day in lost revenue. Someone was systematically attacking her business empire, and they were good at it. Serafina sat in an emergency meeting with her executive team, listening to her COO explain the cascade of disasters with increasing frustration. We're being targeted, James Park said bluntly. He was a former Goldman Sachs executive who'd joined Moretti Holdings because he believed in Serafina's vision. Now he looked like he was reconsidering that belief. Someone with resources and connections is coming after us. The fire could be random, but the investor withdrawals and code violations, that's coordinated. Options? Serafina asked.
We need to figure out who's behind this and why, James said. Then we either negotiate or we fight. I don't negotiate with terrorists. This isn't terrorism, it's business warfare, and we're losing. Serafina looked around the conference room at the team she'd assembled over the past decade. Good people, smart people, people who'd believed in her vision of building something legitimate and successful. Now, they were caught in crossfire that had nothing to do with hotels or real estate, and everything to do with the fact that she'd once been married to organized crime. Give me 24 hours, she said. I'll handle this. After the meeting, Alicia found her in her office. You look like hell, Alicia said, closing the door. I feel worse. What's happening? And don't give me the corporate spin. Tell me the truth. Serafina handed her the threatening letter. Alicia read it once, twice, then looked up with wide eyes. Who sent this? I don't know. Could be someone from Dante's organization seeking revenge. Could be rivals trying to eliminate competition now that I'm vulnerable. Could be... She stopped. Could be what? Could be Dante himself, Serafina said quietly. Trying to force me to testify by threatening everything I built. You think he'd do that?
A month ago, I would have said no. Now? She gestured at the chaos surrounding them. I don't know what he's capable of anymore. Alicia sat down heavily. So what are you going to do? Find out who's coming after me, Serafina said, then make them regret it. Guess. The break came from an unexpected source. Marco Santoro, Dante's underboss, requested a meeting. Serafina almost refused. Marco was Dante's creature, loyal to the bone, complicit in every crime the organization had committed. Meeting with him felt like walking into a trap, but she needed information, and Marco, apparently, needed her. They met in a public place, a coffee shop in Midtown, mid-afternoon, surrounded by tourists and business professionals. Marcus sat at a nearby table, watching everything, his hand probably resting on the concealed weapon Serafina knew he carried. Marco looked terrible. His suit was rumpled, his face unshaven, his eyes carrying the particular exhaustion of a man who hasn't slept properly in weeks. He ordered black coffee and got straight to business. Someone's trying to kill you, he said. Serafina's blood went cold. What? Not physically, not yet. But they're destroying your business, targeting your properties, scaring away your investors. He leaned forward. It's not coming from Dante. He's in federal custody, and he can't orchestrate something like this from inside. Then who? Someone inside the organization, someone who thinks you're a threat. Marco's jaw tightened. There's a power struggle happening. With Dante gone, everyone's scrambling for position. Some people blame you for triggering the federal investigation. They think if they hurt you bad enough, maybe Dante cooperates with prosecutors to protect you. Maybe that gives them leverage. That's insane. That's desperation, Marco corrected. The organization is bleeding. Guys are getting arrested daily. Money's frozen. Everyone's looking for an angle. You're the easiest target because you're outside the protection structure now. Serafina processed this. Why are you telling me? Because Dante asked me to, Marco said simply. Before they arrested him, he gave me specific instructions. If anything happened to him, I was supposed to protect you. Make sure you stayed safe. Even after everything I did? Especially after everything you did. Marco's expression softened slightly. Look, Mrs. Vitali, don't call me that. Serafina, he corrected. Dante knows he fucked up. He knows he destroyed something good because he was too stupid and arrogant to see what he had. The affair with Vivian, the humiliation, all of it. He regrets it. And now he's watching you get hurt because of his choices. He can't live with that. So he sent you to play bodyguard? He sent me to give you information, Marco said. The person coming after you is Anthony Caruso. He's a capo, mid-level guy, runs protection rackets in Queens. With Dante gone, he sees an opportunity to move up. But he needs to prove himself to the other capos. And the way he's chosen to prove himself is by destroying you. Why me? Because you're visible. Because everyone knows you triggered the federal investigation by removing legal protections. Because hurting you sends a message that Caruso is strong enough to go after the boss's wife. Marco finished his coffee. He's the one who set the fire in Boston. He's the one who pressured your investors. He's the one who planted the code violations. How do you know? Because I'm still inside, Marco said. And people talk. Serafina stared at him. What do you want in exchange for this information? Nothing, Marco said. Dante's orders were clear. I protect you. No strings, no deals. He stood to leave. Marco, Serafina called, why are you still loyal to him? After everything that's happened, Marco looked back with something that might have been sadness. Because 12 years ago, Dante's father killed my brother over a gambling debt. Dante could have let it stand. Blood for blood. Old school. Instead, he went against his own father, made it right, gave my family compensation. He showed me something other than violence. He paused. I know what he is, but I also know what he can be. That's worth staying loyal to. After Marco left, Serafina sat in the coffee shop for a long time, processing everything. Anthony Caruso. A name. A target. A solution. She pulled out her phone and made a call. Samantha? I need you to dig up everything you can find on Anthony Caruso. Financial records, property holdings, business interests, everything. Why? Her attorney asked. Because I'm going to war, Serafina said. And I need ammunition. It took 48 hours for Samantha's investigators to assemble a comprehensive profile on Anthony Caruso. What they found was exactly what Serafina expected. A mid-level criminal trying to look legitimate, with a dozen shell companies, 3 restaurants that functioned as fronts, and property holdings that didn't match his reported income. But they also found something interesting. Caruso's daughter attended a prestigious private school in Manhattan. His wife shopped at luxury stores in Soho. His elderly mother lived in a nursing home in New Jersey, an expensive facility that specialized in memory care. These were pressure points. These were vulnerabilities. Serafina could have used them. Could have threatened Caruso's family the way he was threatening her business. Could have played by the old rules, the violent rules, the rules that had governed Dante's world for decades. Instead, she made a different choice. She called Special Agent Catherine Price. Agent Price, this is Serafina Moretti. I'd like to discuss a potential cooperation agreement. The meeting took place in a federal building downtown, in a windowless conference room that smelled like burnt coffee and institutional cleaning products. Agent Price sat across from Serafina and Samantha, flanked by 2 other agents and an assistant U.S. attorney. Thank you for agreeing to meet, Agent Price began. Let's skip the pleasantries, Serafina said. You want information about the Vitali organization. I have that information, but I'm not testifying against Dante. That's a non-starter, the prosecutor said immediately. Hear me out, Serafina continued. I can give you someone better than Dante, someone currently active, currently committing crimes, currently operating outside federal scrutiny. Who? Anthony Caruso, Serafina said. She slid a file across the table, the same file Samantha's investigators had compiled. He's a capo in the Vitali organization. He runs protection rackets, extortion, illegal gambling, and over the past 2 weeks he's been engaged in systematic arson, intimidation, and economic terrorism targeting my legitimate businesses. Agent Price opened the file and scanned the contents. This is detailed, she said slowly. I'm very good at research, Serafina replied. I can give you everything you need to build a case against Caruso. Financial records showing criminal proceeds, testimony about his activities within the organization, documentation of his recent attacks against my properties. Everything. In exchange for what? Immunity for me. And you leave Dante alone. The prosecutor laughed. You're joking. I'm not, Serafina said calmly. Dante's already facing life in prison. Your case against him is solid. You don't need my testimony. But Caruso is still operating freely. He's still committing crimes. And with Dante in custody, he's positioning himself to take over the organization. You take him down, you don't just get one conviction. You destabilize the entire power structure. Agent Price exchanged glances with the prosecutor. We'll need to discuss this, she said finally. Discuss quickly, Serafina said, standing. Because every day Caruso operates freely is another day my businesses are under attack. And if I'm forced to solve this problem myself, you won't like my methods." It wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And everyone in the room heard it clearly. Dashatz. The federal agents didn't take long to decide. 48 hours later, Samantha called with news. The U.S. Attorney's Office had accepted Serafina's cooperation agreement. In exchange for detailed testimony and documentation about Anthony Caruso's criminal activities, Serafina would receive immunity from prosecution for any alleged involvement in Vitali organization finances. Dante's case would proceed without her cooperation. "You got what you wanted," Samantha said. "Not what I wanted," Serafina corrected. "What I needed. There's a difference." The arrest happened fast. Federal agents raided 3 of Caruso's properties simultaneously, seizing financial records, computers, and enough evidence to support a dozen felony charges. Caruso himself was arrested at his restaurant in Queens. Perp walked past cameras in handcuffs while reporters shouted questions. Within 24 hours, 2 other capos connected to Caruso were also arrested. The Vitali organization, already hemorrhaging from Dante's indictment, began to fully collapse. And Serafina watched it all happen from her office, feeling something she couldn't quite name. Not satisfaction, not guilt, something in between. The hollow awareness that she'd just crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She'd cooperated with federal agents. She'd become the thing Dante's world feared most. An informant. That night, her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Hello?" "You fucking bitch, what?" a voice hissed. Male. Angry. Unhinged. "You think you're safe because you talk to the feds? You think they can protect you? You just signed your own death warrant." The line went dead. Serafina sat very still, phone in hand, pulse hammering. Someone knew. Word had gotten out about her cooperation, and now the target on her back had just grown exponentially larger. She called Marcus immediately. "We need to go to full security protocols," she said. "Now." "What happened?" "I just made myself the most hated woman in New York's criminal underworld," Serafina said quietly. "And I need to survive long enough to see tomorrow." She hung up and stood at her office window, looking out over the city that had once felt like home and now felt like a battlefield. Somewhere out there, people wanted her dead. Somewhere out there, Dante was sitting in a federal detention center facing life in prison, probably hearing about her cooperation and wondering if the woman he'd once loved had just betrayed him too. Somewhere out there, the empire she'd built was teetering on the edge of collapse, vulnerable to every threat and pressure that came with being connected, even tangentially, to organized crime. And somewhere deep inside herself, Serafina felt the last piece of her old identity crumble away. She wasn't Mrs. Dante Vitali anymore. She wasn't even Serafina Moretti, the invisible architect who'd held up an empire while remaining hidden. She was something new now. Something harder. Something that scared her more than anything that had come before. A woman who'd learned that survival sometimes meant becoming exactly what you'd always feared. A woman who'd discovered that freedom wasn't just about walking away. It was about being willing to burn down everything, including yourself, rather than stay trapped. And as city lights glittered like broken glass across Manhattan, Serafina made a decision. She wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She wasn't negotiating. She was going to finish what she started, even if it destroyed her in the process. Even if it meant facing threats from every direction. Criminal organizations, federal agents, people who wanted revenge, people who wanted power. Even if it meant accepting that some choices leave permanent scars. Because 12 years of being useful had taught her one final lesson. The only person you could truly depend on was yourself. And the only empire worth protecting was the one you built from your own blood, sweat, and refusal to break. The war wasn't over. It was just beginning. And Serafina intended to win, no matter the cost. The death threat came at 3:17 a.m., delivered not through a phone call or anonymous letter, but through something far more personal. Serafina woke to the smell of gasoline. Her apartment building's fire alarm wasn't screaming yet, but her instincts were. She rolled out of bed, already reaching for her phone, already moving toward the door, when she saw it. Someone had slid an envelope under her apartment door. The paper was soaked in accelerant. Her hand shook as she grabbed it with a dish towel, careful not to let the liquid touch her skin. Inside was a single photograph, her mother's house in Connecticut. The image was taken from across the street, through a telephoto lens showing her elderly mother watering plants in the front garden. On the back, written in block letters, "Cooperate again, and she burns." Serafina's breath stopped. They knew where her mother lived. They'd been watching her family. This wasn't just business warfare anymore. This was personal. This was the kind of threat that meant someone had crossed every line, abandoned every code, decided that civilian casualties were acceptable. She called Marcus immediately. "I need a security team at my mother's house in Connecticut. Now. Right fucking now." "On it," Marcus said, his voice instantly alert despite the hour. "What happened?" "They're threatening her. They know where she lives. They—" Serafina's voice cracked. She forced it steady. "Get someone there. Armed, capable. I don't care what it costs." 15 minutes, Marcus promised. Serafina hung up and stared at the photograph in her trembling hands. Her mother was 72 years old, widowed, retired. She lived quietly in a small house surrounded by flower gardens and had nothing to do with organized crime, federal investigations, or the war Serafina had accidentally started. But none of that mattered, because Serafina had cooperated with federal agents, and in the criminal underworld, that made everyone she loved a legitimate target. She called her mother. 3 rings, 4, 5. "Hello?" Her mother's voice was groggy, confused. "Serafina? It's 3 in the morning." Relief flooded through her so intensely she almost couldn't speak. "Mom, listen to me very carefully. Some men are going to arrive at your house in about 10 minutes. They're security. I hired them. Let them in. Do exactly what they tell you to do." "What?" "Serafina, what's going on?" "I can't explain right now. Just trust me, please." "Are you in danger?" The question hit harder than it should have. Was she in danger? She was standing in her apartment at 3 a.m. holding a gasoline-soaked death threat after cooperating with federal agents to bring down a member of her ex-husband's criminal organization. Danger didn't begin to describe her current situation. "I'm handling it," Serafina said, "but I need you safe. The security team will stay with you until this is over." "Until what is over?" "Mom, please, just do what they say." She hung up before her mother could ask more questions she couldn't answer. Then she sat on her couch in the dark, still holding the photograph, and felt the full weight of her choices settle on her shoulders like concrete. She'd thought destroying Dante's empire would set her free. She'd thought building her own empire would make her safe. She'd thought cooperating with federal agents would solve her problems. Instead, she'd painted a target on everyone she loved. And now someone was coming to collect. By sunrise, Marcus had assembled a complete security assessment. Serafina sat in her office. She'd refused to go home, couldn't stand the thought of smelling gasoline in her own apartment, while he laid out the situation with military precision. "Your mother's secure. 4-man rotation, 24-hour coverage. The house has been swept for devices. We've installed new locks and a monitoring system." He paused. "But Mrs. Serafina, we need to talk about your exposure." "I'm listening." "You have too many vulnerabilities, too many properties, too many employees, too many people connected to you who could be targeted." Marcus pulled up a digital map on his tablet showing all of Serafina's business holdings. The Boston Hotel, the Miami Resort Development, your Manhattan flagship property, they're all potential attack vectors. And that's not even counting the human targets. Your staff, your investors, your friends. What are you suggesting? Consolidation. Pull back. Reduce your footprint until the threat passes. "That could take months," Serafina said. "Years. I can't just pause my life because someone's threatening me." "Then you accept the risk," Marcus said flatly. "But understand what that risk means. It means every person who works for you is in danger. Every property you own is a potential target. Every relationship you have becomes a weapon someone can use against you." Serafina stared at the map on his screen, seeing her empire reduced to tactical vulnerabilities. Every hotel a bomb waiting to explode. Every employee a hostage. Every achievement a liability. This was what freedom looked like. This was what survival cost. "Double security on all properties," she said finally. "Hire additional staff if needed. Install surveillance systems. Brief all employees on basic threat awareness. And Marcus? Anyone who wants to leave, let them. No penalties, no questions. I won't force people to stay in a war zone." "Understood." After he left, Serafina sat alone in her office watching the sun rise over Manhattan and wondering when exactly everything had gone so catastrophically wrong. The betrayal came from the last place she expected. Alessia appeared at her office that afternoon, which wasn't unusual. They'd been having almost daily meetings since the federal indictments dropped, with Alessia providing emotional support and strategic advice. But today, something felt different. Alessia's energy was off. Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "We need to talk," Alessia said, closing the office door. "About?" "About the fact that you're cooperating with the FBI." Serafina went very still. "How do you know that?" "Because I have sources," Alessia said. "Just like you do. And those sources tell me you gave federal agents everything they needed to arrest Anthony Caruso. You testified. You provided documentation. You became an informant." "To protect my business," Serafina said carefully. "Caruso was destroying everything I built. I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice." Alessia sat down across from her. "You chose to cooperate with federal agents. Do you understand what that makes you? What that means in Dante's world?" "I'm not in Dante's world anymore." "You're married to him. That makes you part of it forever." Alessia leaned forward. "Serafina, I've been your friend since college. I love you. But you need to understand something. The people who run this city, the people with real power, they don't forgive cooperation. Ever. You've made yourself untouchable in the worst possible way. So what do you want me to do? Let Caruso burn down my hotels? Let him threaten my employees? Destroy everything I've built? I want you to be smart," Alicia said. "And cooperating with the feds is the opposite of smart." Something cold slithered down Serafina's spine. "Why do you care so much?" "Because you're my friend." "That's not an answer." Alessia was quiet for a long moment. Then she sighed. "Because I owe people money. A lot of money. Gambling debts. And those people are connected to the same organizations you just pissed off by cooperating." The words landed like bullets. Serafina stared at her oldest friend, seeing her for the first time with clear eyes. "How much?" $2 million, Alessia said quietly. "I've been gambling for years, sports betting, poker, high-stakes games. It got out of control. And the people I owe, they're not patient." "So what? You're here to threaten me? To pressure me on their behalf?" "I'm here to offer you a solution," Alessia said. "The people I owe are willing to forgive my debt if you do something for them." "What?" "Recant your testimony against Caruso. Tell the FBI you lied. Claim you were coerced or mistaken. Give Caruso's lawyers enough reasonable doubt to get the charges dropped." Serafina felt like she'd been punched. "You're asking me to commit perjury." "I'm asking you to save both our lives," Alessia corrected. "Because if you don't, they'll kill me. And after they kill me, they'll come after you. And your mother, and everyone else you care about." "Get out," Serafina said quietly. "Serafina, get the fuck out of my office." Alessia stood slowly. "You have 48 hours to decide. After that, the offer expires and we both deal with the consequences." She left. Serafina sat frozen at her desk, feeling the walls close in around her. Her oldest friend, the person who'd stood beside her through college, through her wedding, through 12 years of navigating life married to organized crime, compromised, controlled, used as a weapon against her. She pulled out her phone and called Samantha. "I need to know everything about Alicia Vale's finances, who she owes money to, how deep she's in, everything." "What's going on?" "Just do it," Serafina said. "Fast." The financial investigation took 6 hours. What Samantha's team uncovered was worse than Serafina had imagined. Alicia wasn't just in debt to random bookies or underground gambling operations. She owed money to a network of lenders connected directly to the Vitali organization. And not just 2 million, closer to 5, accumulated over 3 years of increasingly desperate bets. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was buried in the transaction records. Alessia had been receiving payments from Vitali-connected accounts for the past 18 months. Regular deposits, structured to look like legitimate business income, but originating from shell companies Serafina recognized because she'd created some of them herself years ago. Alessia had been on Dante's payroll for a year and a half, while pretending to be Serafina's friend. while offering support and advice, while gathering information about Serafina's businesses, her plans, her vulnerabilities. She'd been a spy the entire time. Serafina read the financial documents 3 times, feeling betrayal cut deeper than any knife. Then she called Marcus. "I need you to find Alessia Vale. Bring her here. I don't care how you do it." "This official business?" "This is survival," Serafina said coldly. Marcus found Alessia at her apartment in Chelsea, brought her to Moretti Tower, deposited her in Serafina's office with the door locked and 2 security guards stationed outside. Alessia looked scared. Good. She should be. "Sit down," Serafina said. Alessia sat. Serafina slid the financial documents across her desk. 18 months. You've been taking money from Dante's organization for 18 months, while pretending to be my friend, while I confided in you, while I trusted you. Alessia's face went pale. "Serafina, I can explain." "Explain what? That you're a fucking traitor?" Serafina's voice was ice. "That you've been reporting my every move to the people trying to destroy me? That our entire friendship has been a lie?" "It wasn't supposed to be like this," Alessia said desperately. "At first they just wanted information, harmless stuff, where you were having lunch, who you were meeting with. I needed the money to cover my debts, and they offered 30 pieces of silver," Serafina interrupted. "That's what they paid Judas. What did they pay you, 100,000? 200? It wasn't about the money." "It's always about the money," Serafina said, "or the fear, or the weakness. Take your pick. But don't you dare sit in my office and tell me it wasn't supposed to be like this. You made a choice. Every time you took their money, every time you reported back to them, every time you looked me in the eye and pretended to give a shit about my life. You chose this." Alessia was crying now. "I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix betrayal." "What are you going to do?" "Good question." Serafina stared at the woman she'd considered her best friend and felt nothing but cold rage. In Dante's world, this kind of betrayal had one solution, one response, one inevitability. But Serafina wasn't in Dante's world anymore. She was building her own. "Get out," Serafina said finally. "Out of my office. Out of my life. Out of my city if you're smart. Because if I ever see you again, I won't be this generous." "Generous? I'm letting you live," Serafina said flatly. "That's more mercy than you deserve. Now get the fuck out before I change my mind." Alessia stumbled toward the door, then paused. "They'll kill me. When they find out I failed." "Not my problem," Serafina said. "Please. You want my help? After everything you've done? After you betrayed me to the people trying to destroy me?" Serafina's laugh was harsh. "You're on your own, just like I've been, just like I've always been." Alessia left. The office felt colder after she was gone. Serafina sat at her desk for a long time, staring at the financial documents that proved her best friend had been selling her out for 18 months. She thought about trust, about loyalty, about the fact that apparently everyone she'd ever cared about had been using her for something. Dante had used her intelligence to build his empire. Alessia had used her friendship to gather information. Even her cooperation with federal agents had been transactional. Immunity in exchange for testimony. There was no one left who valued her for herself, no one who saw her as anything other than a tool, a resource, a means to an end. She was utterly alone, and the realization didn't hurt as much as it should have. Maybe that was the problem. The phone call came at midnight. Unknown number. Serafina almost ignored it, but something made her answer. "Hello? You should have taken the deal." The voice was male, rough, familiar somehow. "Now everyone pays." "Who is this?" "Someone who gave you a chance to make things right. You refused. Now we do things the hard way." "If you threaten me or my mother again..." "Your mother?" The voice laughed. "We're past threatening mothers. We're moving on to bigger targets." The line went dead. Serafina's pulse hammered. She called Marcus immediately. "Something's wrong. I just got a call. They said they're moving on to bigger targets." "Define bigger." "I don't..." She stopped. "The hotels. They're going after the hotels." She pulled up the security feeds for her 3 major properties on her laptop. Boston looked normal. Miami looked normal. But the Manhattan flagship property, her largest, most valuable asset, showed something strange on the exterior cameras. A van parked across the street, engine running, no one getting in or out, just sitting there at midnight in front of a luxury hotel. "Marcus, get teams to the Manhattan property right now. I think—" The feed went black. Then, 30 seconds later, her phone exploded with emergency alerts. Fire reported at Moretti Manhattan Hotel. Multiple floors involved. Guests evacuating, emergency services responding. Serafina watched her flagship property burn through live news feeds while sitting helpless in her apartment. Watched flames consume the building she'd spent 5 years developing. Watched firefighters battle an inferno that had clearly been set deliberately, professionally, with accelerants placed to cause maximum damage. Watched her empire burn in real time. By morning, the fire was contained. The damage assessment came through her insurance company, catastrophic. The building would need to be demolished, $80 million in property value destroyed, hundreds of employees without jobs, guests traumatized, her reputation shattered. And on the news, the narrative forming, Serafina Moretti, wife of imprisoned mob boss Dante Vitale, whose business empire is crumbling under mysterious circumstances. Investigators suspect organized crime connections. Federal officials declined to comment. She'd been destroyed, publicly, completely, professionally. And everyone watching knew exactly who was responsible. Serafina sat in her office at Moretti Tower, the one property they hadn't touched yet, and felt the last piece of her carefully constructed world collapse. She'd tried to build something legitimate. She'd tried to be more than just Dante's wife. She'd tried to prove she could succeed outside the criminal underworld. And she'd failed. Not because she wasn't smart enough, or capable enough, or strong enough, but because the world she'd married into didn't let people escape. Once you were marked as connected to organized crime, that stain never washed off. It followed you, infected everything you touched, destroyed everything you built. Her phone rang. Dante, calling from federal detention through his attorney's phone. She answered. "I heard about the hotel," Dante said. His voice sounded wrecked. "Serafina, I'm so sorry. I never wanted this. I never—" "Stop," she said quietly. "I can fix this. I can talk to people. I can—" "You can't fix anything," Serafina interrupted. "You're in federal custody facing life in prison. You have no power anymore, no influence, no empire. It's gone. All of it." "Then what are you going to do?" Good question. What was she going to do? Her business was destroyed. Her best friend had betrayed her. Her mother was under armed protection. Federal agents were building cases that might eventually include her despite immunity agreements. Criminal organizations wanted her dead for cooperating. Media outlets were dragging her name through mud. She had nothing left to lose. Which meant, paradoxically, she had everything to gain. "I'm going to finish what I started," Serafina said. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm done playing by anyone else's rules. Yours, the FBI's, the criminal underworlds, societies. I'm done trying to be legitimate. I'm done trying to be respectable. I'm done trying to be anything other than what I actually am." "And what's that?" Serafina looked out her office window at the Manhattan skyline, seeing her reflection superimposed over the city. She looked different somehow. Harder. Colder. More dangerous. "Someone who learned from the best," she said quietly. "Someone who spent 12 years watching you build an empire through intelligence, strategy, and ruthlessness. Someone who has nothing left to lose and everything to prove." "Serafina, they want a war?" she continued. "Fine. I'll give them a war. But it won't be fought with guns or bombs or street violence. It'll be fought with information, with leverage, with every dirty secret I learned during 12 years of building your empire." "That's suicide." "No," Serafina corrected. "That's evolution. I spent 12 years being useful, being invisible, being the smart woman behind the powerful man. Now I'm going to show everyone what happens when that woman stops hiding." She hung up. Then she opened her laptop and began compiling every piece of information she'd ever gathered about the Vitale organization. Every name, every crime, every connection, every vulnerability. 12 years of intelligence, 12 years of secrets, 12 years of ammunition. She was going to burn down the entire criminal underworld that had tried to destroy her. And she was going to do it from the ashes of her own empire. Because the only way to survive in a world that refused to let her escape was to become the thing everyone feared most. Not a victim, not a wife, not a businesswoman playing at legitimacy, but a woman with nothing left to lose and the intelligence to destroy everyone who'd underestimated her. The war was about to get very personal, and Serafina intended to win, even if it meant becoming the monster she'd spent 12 years trying not to be. Serafina spent 3 days compiling evidence like a prosecutor building a death penalty case. She didn't sleep, didn't eat properly, lived on coffee and adrenaline while her fingers flew across keyboard keys, pulling together 12 years of intelligence into a weapon sharp enough to cut throats. Every shell corporation she'd ever established for the Vitali organization, documented with formation papers, bank records, transaction histories. Every offshore account she'd structured in Zurich, Panama, and Dubai, complete with routing numbers, signatories, and the real names behind the corporate veils. Every politician who'd accepted bribes, photographed at charity events, recorded in meeting notes, their payments traced through laundered contributions. Every judge who'd dismissed cases, their rulings cross-referenced with Vitali legal victories and subsequent financial transfers to family members. Every business partnership that served as a front, their true ownership structures exposed, their criminal proceeds documented. 12 years of secrets, 12 years of leverage, 12 years of ammunition she'd carefully preserved because some part of her had always known she might need insurance against the world she'd married into. Now that insurance was becoming a nuclear option, Marcus appeared in her office doorway at 2 a.m. on the third night, his expression somewhere between concerned and terrified. "You haven't gone home in 70 hours, he said. "I'm working." "You're destroying yourself." He walked closer, studying the monitors surrounding her desk. "What is all this?" "Evidence," Serafina said simply. "Everything I know about the Vitali organization and every connected entity. I'm organizing it, cataloging it, preparing it for distribution." "Distribution to who?" "Everyone." She pulled up a contact list on one screen. Federal prosecutors, state attorneys general, the FBI, the DEA, the IRS, every law enforcement agency that's ever investigated organized crime in New York. And then the media, Times, Post, Wall Street Journal, every investigative journalist who's ever written about mob activity. Marcus went very still. "That's a death sentence." "They already want me dead," Serafina said. "This just gives me leverage, mutually assured destruction. If they come after me, I release everything. If I die mysteriously, my attorney has instructions to publish the entire archive, every name, every crime, every connection." "You're talking about bringing down half the criminal infrastructure in New York." "I'm talking about surviving," Serafina corrected. "And the only way to survive when everyone wants you dead is to make yourself too dangerous to kill. This is insane. This is evolution." She looked up at him with eyes that had forgotten how to blink. "I spent 12 years being useful, being careful, being invisible. It kept me alive, but it didn't keep me safe. Nothing keeps you safe in this world except being the person everyone fears most." Marcus studied her for a long moment. "You're not the woman I met 6 months ago." "That woman's dead," Serafina said flatly. "She burned in that hotel fire. What's left is something different. Something worse? Something real." After Marcus left, Serafina returned to her work. By dawn, she had everything compiled into a single encrypted digital archive. 3,000 pages of documentation, 500 hours of recorded conversations, 2,000 financial transactions, and enough evidence to trigger 100 federal investigations. She uploaded it to secure cloud storage with deadman switches configured. If she didn't log in every 72 hours, the archive would automatically distribute to every contact on her list. Then she made copies on encrypted drives and gave one to Samantha with explicit instructions. "If anything happens to me, anything at all, you release this. No hesitation, no second thoughts. You burn down everyone who ever worked with the Vitali organization." Samantha stared at the drive like it might explode. "This will destroy lives." "It'll save mine," Serafina said. "That's all I care about now?" Gems. The response came faster than she expected. 48 hours after setting up her deadman switches, Serafina received a visitor at Moretti Tower. Not a threatening call or anonymous message. An actual person requesting a meeting through proper channels, making an appointment, arriving in daylight. Vincent Castellano. The name made Marcus's hand move instinctively toward his concealed weapon. Absolutely not, Marcus said. This man is, that's it.
I know who he is, Serafina interrupted. Vincent Castellano was a legend in New York's criminal underworld, not because he was violent or flashy, but because he was the opposite. He was the diplomat, the negotiator, the man who sat at the table when different organizations needed to talk instead of shoot. If Castellano was coming to see her, it meant someone important wanted to negotiate. He could be here to kill you. Then let him try, Serafina said. But I don't think that's why he's here. Show him to the conference room. Pat him down first. Vincent Castellano was 70 years old, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than most cars, and utterly calm. He submitted to the security pat-down without complaint, surrendered his phone and wallet, and entered the conference room like he was attending a business lunch. Mrs. Vitali, he said, offering his hand. Moretti, Serafina corrected, not taking it. I don't use my married name anymore. My apologies. He sat down across from her, completely relaxed. I appreciate you agreeing to meet. I didn't agree. I'm simply curious why you're here. I'm here because you've created a significant problem, Castellano said pleasantly. And problems need solutions. What problem? The archive you've compiled, the dead man's switches, the threat to expose everyone connected to certain business interests. He folded his hands on the table. That information puts a lot of people at risk. Important people. People who would prefer to avoid federal attention. Then they shouldn't have tried to kill me, Serafina said flatly. They shouldn't have burned my hotel. They shouldn't have threatened my mother. They created this situation. I'm simply adapting to survive. Understandable, Castellano agreed. But you must see how your current position is untenable. You can't live indefinitely with that sword hanging over everyone's head. Eventually, someone will find a way to neutralize the threat. And you. They can try. They will succeed, Castellano corrected gently. Not through violence, through patience, through finding everyone you've shared copies with, through compromising your systems, through waiting until you make a mistake. He leaned forward slightly. You're intelligent, Mrs. Moretti. You know this strategy only works short-term. Long-term, it's suicide. So what are you proposing? A deal, Castellano said. You destroy the archive. All copies, all backups, all dead man switches. In exchange, we guarantee your safety, and your mother's safety, and the safety of everyone you care about. You walk away from this war alive and untouched. In exchange for giving up my only leverage. In exchange for your life. Serafina laughed harshly. You expect me to trust a promise from people who've spent 2 months trying to destroy me? I expect you to be pragmatic, Castellano said. Right now you're in a standoff. You can hurt us, but we can hurt you. That's equilibrium. But equilibrium is exhausting. It requires constant vigilance. Eventually someone breaks, usually the person with fewer resources. I have enough resources. Do you? Castellano gestured around the conference room. Your business empire is in ruins. Your flagship property burned. Your investors fled. Your reputation is shattered. Your best friend betrayed you. You're surviving on spite and caffeine. How much longer can you sustain this? The words hit harder than they should have because they were true. Serafina was exhausted, financially damaged, emotionally wrecked, running on fumes and fury. But she'd learned something important over the past 3 months. Survival wasn't about strength. It was about refusing to quit. Here's my counteroffer, Serafina said coldly. Everyone leaves me alone. Completely. Permanently. No threats. No surveillance. No attacks on my businesses or family. I get to rebuild my life without interference. In exchange, the archive stays sealed. But if anyone at all, comes after me or mine, everything goes public. Every name, every crime, every secret. That's essentially the same standoff we're in now. Exactly, Serafina said. Except now you understand I'm serious. I've proven I'll cooperate with federal agents. I've proven I'll destroy my own empire rather than surrender. I've proven I'm willing to burn down everyone who threatens me. So the question isn't whether I'll follow through. The question is whether you're willing to gamble that I won't. Castellano studied her with ancient, calculating eyes. You've changed. I've evolved. Dante's wife would never have made these threats. Dante's wife is dead, Serafina said.
I'm what's left, and I'm much more dangerous. Castellano stood slowly. I'll convey your position, but I should warn you, there are people involved in this who don't respond well to ultimatums. People who might decide you're more trouble alive than dead, regardless of the archive. Then they'll learn an expensive lesson about underestimating women, Serafina said. After Castellano left, Marcus reappeared. That went well, he said sarcastically. It bought us time, Serafina replied. They're negotiating instead of attacking. That's progress. Or they're planning something worse. Probably both. Her phone rang. Samantha. We have a problem, her attorney said without preamble. The federal prosecutor's office just filed a motion to revoke your immunity agreement. Serafina's blood went cold. On what grounds? They're claiming you withheld material evidence during your cooperation, that you failed to disclose the full extent of your involvement in Vitali organization finances. They're saying your testimony against Caruso was incomplete and potentially misleading. That's bullshit. I gave them everything they asked for. They're asking for more now, Samantha said. They want complete testimony about Dante's operation. They want you to provide evidence that could be used in his trial. And if you refuse, they'll prosecute you for conspiracy, money laundering, and about 15 other felonies. When did this happen? The motion was filed 20 minutes ago. 20 minutes after Castellano left her office. The timing wasn't coincidental. Someone had pressure on the federal prosecutors. Someone with enough influence to make them renege on an immunity deal. Someone who decided that legal threats would be more effective than criminal ones. They were attacking from every direction now. Business, personal, legal. Serafina felt walls closing in from all sides, felt the trap tightening around her throat, felt every escape route being systematically eliminated. She had maybe 72 hours before the legal system crushed her, maybe less before the criminal underworld made another move. Maybe no time at all before everything she'd built and everyone she loved became collateral damage in a war she'd accidentally started by refusing to stay invisible. Schedule a meeting with the prosecutors, Serafina told Samantha. Tomorrow morning, I'll handle it. How? I don't know yet, Serafina admitted, but I'll figure something out. I always do. She hung up and sat alone in her office, staring at the encrypted archive on her computer screen. 3,000 pages of evidence. 12 years of secrets. The nuclear option that was supposed to protect her, but instead had painted an even bigger target on her back. She'd thought information was power. She'd thought leverage was safety. She'd thought if she could just be dangerous enough, smart enough, ruthless enough, people would leave her alone. But she'd been wrong, because the most dangerous thing in the world wasn't information or leverage or ruthlessness. It was desperation, and she'd made everyone desperate. The federal prosecutor's office was located in a brutalist concrete building downtown that looked like it had been designed specifically to crush hope. Serafina walked through metal detectors at 9 a.m. with Samantha beside her, both of them dressed in business armor, expensive suits that said, "We're professionals," even while the system tried to destroy them. Assistant U.S. Attorney James Park. Different. James Park, not her former COO, met them in a conference room with 3 other prosecutors and Special Agent Catherine Price. "Thank you for coming," Park said with false pleasantness. "Let's skip the bullshit," Serafina replied. "Your motion to revoke my immunity is politically motivated and legally questionable. I fulfilled every term of my cooperation agreement. I provided testimony and documentation against Anthony Caruso exactly as requested. Now you're moving the goalposts." "We're pursuing justice," Park said, "which requires complete cooperation, not selective disclosure. I gave you what you needed to prosecute Caruso." "We need more," Agent Price interjected. "We need your testimony against Dante Vitali. Complete testimony. Every financial structure you created. Every criminal transaction you facilitated. Everything." "I already told you I won't testify against Dante." "Then you violated the spirit of your immunity agreement," Park said, "which gives us grounds to revoke it and prosecute you." "For crimes you already agreed not to prosecute," Samantha pointed out. "Good luck explaining that to a judge." "We'll take our chances," Park said, "unless Mrs. Moretti wants to reconsider her position." The room went quiet. Serafina looked around the table at 5 people who held her freedom in their hands. 5 people who'd decided she was a useful tool in their prosecution of organized crime. 5 people who didn't give a damn about her life or safety or the fact that she was being crushed between multiple forces. They just wanted their conviction, their career advancement, their headlines.
No, Serafina said quietly. No, Park repeated. No, I won't testify against Dante. No, I won't let you revoke my immunity. And no, I won't let you pressure me into becoming your star witness. She leaned forward. Here's what's going to happen instead. You're going to withdraw your motion. You're going to honor the immunity agreement we already signed. And you're going to leave me alone. Or what? Agent Price asked.
Or I release an archive containing evidence of every dirty cop, corrupt politician, and compromised official who's ever worked with organized crime in New York. Serafina pulled out her phone and showed them a screenshot of the encrypted file. 3,000 pages, 500 hours of recordings, everything I learned during 12 years inside the Vitali organization. And I'm not talking about mobsters. I'm talking about the people who enable them, judges, prosecutors, police captains, politicians, people on your side of the law who take money to look the other way. What? Yipong to your soul. The temperature in this room dropped 20 degrees. That's obstruction of justice, Park said carefully. That's insurance, Serafina corrected. And if you push me, I'll burn down your entire system, not because I want to, but because I refuse to be a victim anymore. She stood. We're done here. Samantha will send over documentation confirming I fulfilled every term of my immunity agreement. If you pursue this further, we'll see you in court. And trust me, you don't want that fight. They left before anyone could respond. In the elevator going down, Samantha exhaled shakily. That was either brilliant or suicidal. Probably both, Serafina admitted. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. Impressive performance, but you just declared war on everyone. Hope you're ready for what comes next. Serafina stared at the message, feeling her pulse accelerate. She'd just threatened federal prosecutors. She'd already threatened organized crime. She'd made enemies of everyone with power in New York. And now they were all coming for her. Max. The attack came 36 hours later, but not from the direction she expected. Serafina was working late at Moretti Tower. She'd basically moved into her office, sleeping on the couch, showering in the executive bathroom, living on coffee and takeout. Marcus had insisted on 24-hour security with armed guards in the lobby and on her floor. It wasn't enough. At 11 p.m., the building's fire alarm screamed to life. Marcus burst into her office. We need to evacuate now. Is it real? Don't know. Not taking chances. Move. They headed for the stairwell. Elevators were death traps during emergencies. But when Marcus opened the stairwell door, smoke poured out. Thick, black, chemical-smelling. Back, he shouted, slamming the door. They ran toward the other stairwell, also filled with smoke. The elevators were shut down due to the fire alarm. They were trapped on the 42nd floor. Marcus pulled out his phone, calling his team in the lobby. We're cut off. Smoke in both stairwells. Need fire department up here now. Through his phone speaker, Serafina heard chaos, shouting, alarms, then gunfire, actual gunfire in the lobby. Marcus's face went white. They're hitting the building. Armed assault on the lobby. My team is engaging. How many? Unknown. But this is coordinated. Fire in the stairwells to trap us. Armed team in the lobby to control the exit. This is an extraction. They're coming for me, Serafina said. Yes. More gunfire through the phone. Then the line went dead. Marcus drew his weapon. Conference room, now. Lock the door. Barricade it with furniture. I'll hold them at the elevator. There are 6 elevators. Then I'll have to be very efficient. They moved fast. Serafina ran to the conference room while Marcus positioned himself in the corridor with clear sight lines to the elevator banks. She started pushing the heavy conference table toward the door when she heard it. Elevator ding, doors sliding open, footsteps. Federal agents, a voice shouted. We're here to extract Mrs. Vitali for her protection. Serafina froze. That voice was familiar. She looked through the conference room's glass wall and saw 4 men in tactical gear with FBI stenciled on their vests. Leading them was someone she recognized, Special Agent Catherine Price. Mrs. Vitali, we know you're here, Price called out. There's an armed assault in progress. We need to get you to safety. Marcus appeared in the corridor, weapon raised. How did you get up here? The stairwells are compromised. Service elevator, Price said. We came in through the parking garage. Now lower your weapon. We're here to help. Something felt wrong. Serafina's instincts screamed warnings she couldn't articulate. Show me your credentials, Marcus demanded. The agents complied, holding up FBI identification. Everything looked legitimate. But Serafina's pulse was hammering because something about this felt staged, orchestrated, wrong. How did you know there was an assault? She called out from the conference room. Price turned toward her voice. We've had surveillance on this building since your meeting with Castellano. We saw the assault team entering and called it in. Why didn't you warn us? It happened too fast. We responded as quickly as we could. Price moved closer to the conference room. Mrs. Vitali, we need to leave. Now. Before whoever's attacking gets up here. No, Serafina said. Excuse me? I'm not going with you. You don't have a choice. You're in imminent danger. We're extracting you to federal protective custody. Funny, Serafina said coldly, because 48 hours ago you were trying to revoke my immunity and prosecute me. Now you're here to protect me. That's a hell of a coincidence. Price's expression didn't change. The situation has evolved. We received intelligence that there's a contract on your life. Multiple organizations are involved. The safest place for you is federal custody. The safest place for your prosecution is federal custody, Serafina corrected, where you can pressure me to testify against Dante without interference, where you control every aspect of my life, where I become your prisoner disguised as your witness. That's not... It's exactly what this is, Serafina interrupted, and I'm not going. Price's pleasant expression finally cracked. You don't get to refuse protective custody. Watch me. Mrs. Vitali, there are armed men in this building trying to kill you. Are there? Serafina moved to the conference room window, looking down at the street below. Fire trucks were arriving, police cars, emergency vehicles, but no armed assault team fleeing the building, no tactical operation in progress, just a routine fire response. The assault in the lobby, Serafina said slowly. That was you, wasn't it? Your people. Creating chaos so you could come up here and rescue me, so you could force me into custody. Price was quiet for too long. Then she sighed. You're too smart for your own good. Marcus raised his weapon again. Step back. Now. Or what? Price asked. You'll shoot federal agents? That's a life sentence. I'll take my chances. The situation hung on a knife's edge. 4 armed federal agents facing 1 private security guard and a woman who'd just figured out she was being kidnapped by the people supposed to protect her. Then Serafina's phone rang. She answered without looking at the caller ID, keeping her eyes on Price. Serafina? Dante's voice frantic. Are you okay? I'm hearing about a fire at your building. I'm fine, sort of. It's complicated. Listen to me very carefully, Dante said urgently. The FBI isn't there to protect you. They're there to pressure you into testifying. They're going to claim protective custody, then hold you until you break. Don't go with them. I figured that out. Good. Because I just did something that's going to make everything worse. Serafina's stomach dropped. What did you do? I cut a deal, Dante said, with the prosecutors. Full cooperation. Everything they want, names, locations, financial structures, all of it, in exchange for reduced sentence and immunity for you. What? You're free, Dante said. Completely. I made sure the deal includes you. They drop everything. No prosecution. No immunity revocation. Nothing. You walk away clean. At what cost? Me, Dante said simply. I give them everything. I testify against everyone. I become the government's star witness. I spend the rest of my life in protective custody, watching everyone I ever knew go to prison. But you're safe. That's the deal. Serafina couldn't breathe. Dante had just destroyed himself to save her, had given up everything, his empire, his reputation, his freedom, his life as he knew it, to ensure she survived. Why? She whispered. Because I love you, Dante said. I always have. I was just too stupid and arrogant to show it. And because everything that's happened to you is my fault. The threats, the attacks, the fire. All of it started because you married me, so I'm ending it. I'm giving them what they want so they leave you alone. Dante. The deal's already signed, he said. It's done. Prosecutors have it. Which means those agents in your building have no authority over you anymore. You're not a witness. You're not a target. You're nobody to them. Serafina looked at Price. Is that true? Did Dante cut a deal? Price's expression was answer enough. When? Serafina demanded. 2 hours ago, Price admitted. But we're still here because you wanted leverage over me, Serafina finished. You wanted to secure me before I realized I was free. But it's too late. She moved toward the conference room door, Marcus covering her. We're leaving, Serafina said. And you're going to let us go. Because if you don't, I'll release that archive. And it includes information about federal agents who've crossed lines, maybe even some in this room. Price stared at her. Then slowly she stepped aside. Serafina and Marcus walked past the 4 agents toward the service elevator Price's team had used. In the elevator going down, Serafina pressed her forehead against the cool metal wall and tried not to cry. Dante had saved her. By sacrificing everything. And she didn't know how to feel about that. Relief? Gratitude? Grief? All of it mixed together into something too complicated to process. The elevator doors opened onto the parking garage. Marcus's car was waiting. They drove away from Moretti Tower while fire trucks and police cars swarmed the building, responding to a false alarm created by federal agents trying to kidnap a witness. Serafina's phone rang again. Samantha. I just got confirmation from the U.S. Attorney's Office, her attorney said. Dante Vitali signed a full cooperation agreement. The deal includes immunity for you. They're dropping everything. You're clear. I know, Serafina said quietly. You're free, Samantha repeated. Completely. No charges, no prosecution, no threats. Free. The word should have felt like victory. Instead, it felt like ash. Because Serafina had won her war. But the cost had been everything and everyone she'd ever cared about. Her business empire was destroyed. Her best friend had betrayed her. Her husband had sacrificed himself to save her. And now she was free to rebuild her life from absolute zero, surrounded by rubble and haunted by ghosts. What are you going to do now? Samantha asked. Serafina looked out the car window at Manhattan glittering in the night, beautiful and brutal and utterly indifferent to her survival. I'm going to do what I always do, she said finally. What's that? Survive. And then build something better from the ashes. Because that was the only thing she'd ever been good at. The only skill that mattered. The only truth that survived every betrayal and every fire. She was still standing. And as long as she was standing, she could build. Even from nothing. Even alone. Even when the cost had been everything, she could build. 6 months after the fire at Moretti Tower, Serafina stood in an empty warehouse in Red Hook, watching construction crews transform concrete and steel into something that might eventually become beautiful. The space had been abandoned for 15 years, a relic of Brooklyn's industrial past, gutted by fire and neglect, forgotten by everyone except real estate speculators who tried and failed to make it profitable. Serafina had purchased it for a fraction of what it was worth because nobody else saw potential in 50,000 square feet of damaged infrastructure. But she'd learned something important over the past year. Damaged things could be rebuilt stronger than they'd been before, if you were willing to do the work. Foundation solid, the contractor said, walking over with blueprints rolled under his arm. Surprisingly solid. Whatever burned here didn't touch the structural integrity. We can work with this. How long? Serafina asked. Full renovation? 18 months, maybe 20 if we hit complications. You have 12, Serafina said. I'll pay overtime, I'll pay bonuses, but I need this operational in 12 months. The contractor whistled. That's aggressive. That's survival, Serafina corrected. After he left, she stood alone in the warehouse while afternoon light cut through broken windows, illuminating dust and possibility in equal measure. This building was going to become the flagship property of her rebuilt empire, a luxury boutique hotel designed for the creative class, with artist studios on the lower floors and guest accommodations above. A hybrid space that celebrated Brooklyn's industrial history while looking toward its future. It was ambitious. It was expensive. It was exactly what she needed to prove she could rise from ashes. Her phone rang. Samantha. We have a problem, her attorney said. Serafina almost laughed. 6 months of rebuilding, and those 4 words still started half her conversations. What kind of problem? Dante's trial starts in 2 weeks. The prosecution wants you to attend. Not as a witness, your immunity deal holds, but as a victim impact observer. They think having his ex-wife in the courtroom will humanize the case for the jury. Serafina's chest tightened. I can't do that. Legally, you don't have to, but politically, refusing might look bad. Like you're protecting him. I'm not protecting him, Serafina said quietly. I'm protecting myself. Seeing him again after everything that's happened, I'm not ready. When will you be ready? Maybe never. Samantha was quiet for a moment. He asks about you. Every time I visit him to coordinate legal details, he always asks if you're okay, if you're safe, if you're rebuilding. What do you tell him? The truth. That you're working 18-hour days turning a burned-out warehouse into something remarkable. That you're surviving. That you're stronger than anyone expected. Does he respond? He smiles, Samantha said. Then he goes back to preparing his testimony. He's giving them everything, Serafina. Every secret, every crime, every person who ever worked with the organization. He's burning down his entire world to make sure you stay safe. Serafina closed her eyes against the sting of tears she refused to shed. I know. Do you hate him for what he did, or love him for what he sacrificed? Both, Serafina admitted. Every single day. Both. After hanging up, she walked through the empty warehouse, her footsteps echoing in the cavernous space. This building was supposed to be her fresh start, her proof that she could succeed without being connected to organized crime, federal investigations, or the man who'd defined her adult life. But 6 months of work hadn't erased the past. It had just taught her to live with the scars. Ma'uk. The call from the Federal Detention Center came 3 days later, at 2 a.m., the hour when emergencies announced themselves and sleep became a luxury you couldn't afford. Mrs. Vitali? A corrections officer. I mean, Ms. Moretti. I'm calling from MDC Brooklyn. Mr. Vitali asked us to contact you. He's been injured. Serafina's blood went cold. How badly? Assault by another inmate. He's stable now, in the medical unit, but he's asking for you. I'm not his wife anymore. Ma'am, with respect, you're listed as his emergency contact. He has no one else. The words hit harder than they should have. Dante Vitali, once the most powerful crime boss in New York, surrounded by soldiers and associates and people who claimed loyalty, reduced to having his ex-wife as his only emergency contact. I'll be there in 30 minutes, Serafina said. She dressed quickly, called Marcus to drive her, and made the trip to the Metropolitan Detention Center in a fog of complicated emotions she couldn't untangle. Anger, concern, guilt, resentment, love. All of it churning together into something that felt like drowning. The MDC was a concrete fortress designed to crush hope. Serafina submitted to security screenings, surrendered her phone and keys, and was escorted through corridors that smelled like industrial cleaner and desperation. Dante was in a private medical room, handcuffed to the bed despite his injuries. His face was a mess, swollen eye, split lip, bruises blooming across his jaw. Someone had worked him over professionally, not to kill, to send a message. Jesus, Serafina whispered. You should see the other guy, Dante said, attempting a smile that turned into a wince. She pulled a chair close to the bed, careful not to touch him. What happened? What do you think? I'm cooperating with federal prosecutors. That makes me the most hated person in here. Someone decided to send me a reminder about the consequences of betrayal. How bad are you hurt? Couple cracked ribs, facial lacerations, nothing permanent. He looked at her with his good eye. I'm sorry they called you. I know you don't want to be here. Then why did you list me as your emergency contact? Because you're the only person I trust, Dante said simply. The only person who knows exactly what I am and chose to build something with me anyway, even if that something eventually fell apart. Serafina studied his battered face, seeing past the bruises to the man beneath. He looked older, tired, worn down by the weight of choices that had finally caught up with him. Why did you do it? She asked quietly. The cooperation deal, sacrificing everything to get me immunity. Why? You really need to ask? Yes. Dante exhaled slowly, wincing at the pain from his ribs. Because 12 years ago, I married the smartest, strongest, most remarkable woman I'd ever met, and instead of treating her like a partner, I treated her like an accessory. I took her intelligence and used it to build my empire while giving her none of the credit. I took her loyalty and repaid it with humiliation. I took her love and threw it away for a 6-month affair with someone who didn't matter. He paused, struggling to find words. And then, when my empire collapsed and everyone scattered like rats, you were the only one who stood up, who fought back, who refused to be destroyed. You turned yourself into the most dangerous person in New York, not through violence, but through intelligence. You became everything I should have recognized you were from the beginning. So you saved me out of guilt? I saved you because you deserved to be saved, Dante corrected. Because somewhere in the wreckage of what we were, I finally learned what I should have known all along. You were never behind me, supporting me, holding me up. You were beside me, equal, partner. I just couldn't see it through my own arrogance. Serafina felt tears building behind her eyes. I destroyed your empire? No, Dante said. I destroyed my empire by taking you for granted. You just removed the scaffolding you'd built to keep it standing. That's not destruction. That's honesty. I cooperated with federal agents against members of your organization. To protect yourself. That's survival. I can't fault you for surviving. I threatened to burn down everyone you ever worked with. And you would have done it, Dante said, something like admiration in his voice. That's what makes you dangerous, not the threats, the follow-through. You proved you're willing to destroy everything rather than surrender. That's power I never had. Serafina reached out slowly and took his hand, the one not handcuffed to the bed rail. His fingers closed around hers with surprising gentleness. I'm sorry, she said, for all of it. For the pain I caused. For the empire I dismantled. For... Don't, Dante interrupted. Don't apologize for refusing to be a victim. That's the only thing you did right. They sat in silence for a long moment, holding hands in a federal detention center medical room, while machines beeped and fluorescent lights hummed and the weight of 12 years pressed down on both of them. What happens now? Serafina asked. I testify. I give the prosecutors everything they need to take down what's left of the organization. I spend the rest of my life in protective custody, watching everyone I ever knew go to prison. And us? There is no us anymore, Dante said quietly. That ended when I walked into your gala with another woman on my arm. Maybe it ended before that? Maybe it was dying slowly for years and we were both too proud to admit it. So this is goodbye? This is closure, Dante corrected. Goodbye implies we'll never see each other again. Closure means we acknowledge what we were, what we became, and what we're choosing to be now. Separate, but not enemies. Not anymore. Serafina nodded slowly, feeling something shift inside her chest. Not healing. Healing would take years. But something like acceptance. I'm building something new, she told him. A hotel in Red Hook. Completely legitimate. Completely mine. It's going to be remarkable. I never doubted that, Dante said. You were always going to be remarkable. With or without me. I wish you could have seen that earlier. So do I. A corrections officer appeared in the doorway. Time's up, ma'am. Serafina stood slowly, reluctantly releasing Dante's hand. Take care of yourself, she said. You too, Dante replied. And Serafina? For what it's worth, I loved you. Really loved you. I was just too broken to love you properly. I know, she said. I loved you too. The version of you that existed in quiet moments when nobody else was watching. The man who could have been remarkable if he'd chosen a different path. Maybe in another life, Dante said. Maybe, Serafina agreed. Then she walked out of the medical room, through the security corridors, past the checkpoints and metal detectors, back into the cold November air, where Marcus was waiting with the car. How is he? Marcus asked. Alive, Serafina said. That's enough. They drove back to Brooklyn in silence while the city glittered around them, beautiful and brutal, and utterly indifferent to the private grief of two people who'd once believed love could survive anything. Dante's trial lasted 6 weeks and dominated every news cycle. Serafina didn't attend. She followed the proceedings through media coverage while working 18-hour days on her hotel renovation, using physical labor as therapy. She watched Dante testify on television, watched him methodically dismantle the criminal organization his father had built over 40 years, watched him name names, describe crimes, provide evidence that sent dozens of people to prison, watched him become the most famous cooperating witness in New York history. And through it all, he never mentioned her. never implicated her, never suggested she'd been complicit in anything beyond being a wife who loved unwisely. The prosecution had wanted her story, the brilliant architect behind the empire, but Dante's testimony carefully protected her, describing her involvement as minimal, unknowing, coerced. It was a lie, but it was a lie that kept her safe. The jury deliberated for 4 days before returning guilty verdicts on all charges. Dante was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison, reduced from life because of his cooperation. With good behavior and witness protection considerations, he'd serve maybe 15. He'd be 70 years old when he got out, if he survived that long. Serafina watched the sentencing on a television in her hotel's construction office, surrounded by blueprints and material samples, and felt something close to grief. Not for Dante specifically, but for everything they'd been and failed to become. For 12 years of potential wasted on violence and ego. For the love story that could have been remarkable if either of them had been brave enough to demand better. After the sentencing, she turned off the television and went back to work. Because that was what survivors did. They kept building. The hotel opened 14 months later on a crisp spring evening that felt like resurrection. Serafina stood in the lobby, all exposed brick and steel beams and carefully curated industrial elegance, watching guests arrive for the soft opening. Artists and musicians and creative professionals from across Brooklyn, drawn by the promise of a space that honored their work while providing luxury accommodations. The press was there too, not covering organized crime this time, but architecture and design. The transformation of a burned-out warehouse into a boutique hotel that captured Brooklyn's artistic spirit while pointing toward its future. Serafina gave interviews about her vision, her process, her commitment to hiring locally and supporting community artists. She talked about resilience and reinvention without mentioning the empire that had burned to create this one. She'd become very good at telling partial truths. Near midnight, after most guests had left and staff were cleaning up, Serafina found herself alone on the hotel's rooftop terrace. The space overlooked the East River with Manhattan glittering across the water like scattered diamonds. She'd once stood in a penthouse overlooking the same view, married to one of the most powerful criminals in New York, believing she was building something meaningful. Now she stood on a different rooftop, unmarried, independent, actually building something meaningful. The journey between those two moments had cost everything, but she was still standing. "Hell of a view," a voice said behind her. Serafina turned to find a man in his 40s, dressed casually but expensively, with intelligent eyes and an easy smile. She recognized him from the guest list. Adrien Laurent, corporate attorney representing several of her investors. "It's why I bought the building," Serafina said. "You can forgive a lot of structural problems when the view looks like this." Adrien moved to the railing beside her, maintaining respectful distance. "I've been following your story, the comeback, the hotel. It's impressive. Thank you. Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask. I might not answer." "How do you do it?" Adrien said. "Rebuild from nothing. Start over after everything fell apart. Where does that strength come from?" Serafina considered the question carefully. "It's not strength, it's stubbornness. I refuse to quit. Even when quitting would be easier, even when quitting would be rational, I just keep building because the alternative is giving up. And I've never been very good at surrender." "That sounds exhausting." "It is," Serafina admitted, "but it's also the only thing I know how to do." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city breathe. "I'd like to take you to dinner sometime," Adrien said, "if you're interested. Not as an investor or business contact, just as someone who finds you fascinating and would like to know you better." Serafina looked at him, really looked, saw genuine interest in his expression. No hidden agenda, no manipulation, just a man asking a woman to dinner because he was intrigued. It felt foreign, dangerous, terrifying in ways that had nothing to do with federal agents or criminal organizations. Because genuine connection required vulnerability, required lowering defenses she'd built over months of survival, required trusting that not every person who showed interest was trying to use her. "I'm not very good at dinner," Serafina said honestly, "or dating, or any of the normal things people do when they're interested in each other. I spent 12 years in a marriage that destroyed me, the last year rebuilding from rubble. I'm not sure I remember how to be a person who just exists without fighting." "Then maybe we start smaller," Adrien suggested. "Coffee, next week. During daylight hours in a very public place. No pressure, no expectations, just conversation. Serafina felt something crack inside her chest, not breaking, but opening. A door she'd kept locked for months beginning to swing on rusty hinges. Coffee, she repeated. I can probably manage coffee. Tuesday? Adrian asked. Tuesday, Serafina agreed. After he left, she stood alone on the rooftop for another hour, watching Manhattan shimmer and fade and shimmer again across dark water. Somewhere in that glittering city, Dante was sitting in a federal prison cell, serving time for crimes she'd helped enable and ultimately helped prosecute. Somewhere out there, Alessia was probably still running from gambling debts and the people she'd betrayed. Somewhere out there, the remnants of the Vitali organization were scattered and broken, serving sentences or hiding in witness protection or starting over under new identities. And here she stood, alive, free, successful, alone but not lonely, scarred but not broken, building something new from the ashes of everything that had burned. The cost had been enormous. The price had been 12 years of her life, a marriage that should have been remarkable, friendships that proved hollow, and an empire that had never really been hers. But the reward was standing on this rooftop, in this building, with this view, knowing she'd survived something that should have destroyed her. Knowing she'd become someone stronger than the girl who'd married into organized crime, believing love conquered everything. Knowing she'd learned the hardest lesson of all, the only person you could truly depend on was yourself. And sometimes, that was enough. Masak. 2 years later, Serafina stood in a different conference room overlooking a different city. Boston this time. Her second hotel was opening in Back Bay, a former textile factory transformed into luxury accommodations with the same design philosophy she'd pioneered in Brooklyn. She had a third property under development in Miami, a fourth planned for Chicago. Moretti Hospitality Group was becoming a brand, a success story. Proof that women could build empires without men defining their worth. Her phone buzzed during a meeting with Boston investors. Text from an unknown number. Congratulations on the Boston opening. You built something remarkable. I always knew you would. D. Serafina stared at the message for a long moment. She hadn't heard from Dante in 2 years, hadn't visited him in prison, hadn't responded to letters his attorney occasionally forwarded. She'd moved on, built a new life, found success on her own terms. But seeing his message still triggered complicated emotions she'd thought were buried. She typed a response. Thank you. I hope you're well. Then she deleted it without sending, because some chapters needed to stay closed, some doors needed to remain locked, some people needed to stay in the past where they belonged. Dante had been her teacher, her husband, her destroyer, her savior. But he wasn't her future. He was simply a lesson she'd learned and survived and moved beyond. She put her phone away and returned to the meeting, discussing expansion strategies and market analysis and all the practical details of building an empire the right way. After the investors left, Adrian appeared in the doorway. They'd been dating for 18 months now, slowly, carefully, with the caution of two people who'd both learned hard lessons about trust. He traveled frequently for his corporate law practice, which meant they saw each other in bursts between long absences. It worked. Not perfect, not fairy tale, but real, honest, built on actual partnership instead of need or dependency or the desperate belief that love could fix brokenness. How'd the meeting go? Adrian asked. Well, they're increasing their investment for the Chicago property. That's fantastic. He crossed the room and kissed her gently. Ready for dinner? I found a place near the harbor you'll love. Let me finish one thing first, Serafina said. After he left, she pulled out her phone and looked at Dante's message again. Then she typed a final response. I learned everything from you, the good and the bad. Thank you for both. I wish you peace. She hit send before she could second-guess the decision. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't reconciliation. It was simply acknowledgement that they'd both been broken people trying to build something meaningful and failing because neither understood how. That the empire they'd created together had been built on sand. That sometimes love wasn't enough if you didn't also have respect, partnership, and the courage to see each other clearly. That she'd needed to lose everything to discover who she actually was beneath the roles she'd played. And that maybe, just maybe, Dante had needed to lose everything too. 3 minutes later, her phone buzzed with a response.
Thank you. For everything.
For surviving. For becoming who you were always meant to be. You were always the Empire. I was just too blind to see it. Serafina read the message twice, then saved it in a folder she rarely opened but couldn't quite delete. Then she stood, smoothed her dress, and walked out to meet Adrian for dinner. Because the past was important, but the present was where she lived, and the future was what she was building one deliberate choice at a time. What? 5 years after Dante's imprisonment, Serafina received an invitation to speak at a women's business conference in New York. The invitation described her as a self-made hospitality entrepreneur who built a successful empire after overcoming significant personal and professional challenges. It was diplomatic language for divorced from a mob boss, nearly destroyed by criminal connections, rebuilt career through pure determination. She almost declined.
Then she thought about the women who might be in that audience. Women trapped in marriages that diminished them. Women convinced they couldn't succeed without male validation. Women who believed their past defined their future. She accepted the invitation. The conference was held at the Javits Center, enormous, impersonal, filled with 3,000 women seeking inspiration and practical business advice. Serafina was scheduled to give a keynote address during the final day's closing session. She stood backstage, waiting for her introduction, feeling her pulse accelerate, in ways that had nothing to do with public speaking and everything to do with standing in Manhattan again after years of deliberately avoiding the city where everything had fallen apart. Our final speaker, the conference host announced, is Serafina Moretti, founder and CEO of Moretti Hospitality Group, owner of 6 luxury boutique hotels across 4 cities, and a remarkable example of entrepreneurial resilience. Serafina walked on stage to thunderous applause, blinded momentarily by stage lights, seeing nothing but the vague shapes of 3,000 women watching her. She'd prepared a speech about business strategy and market analysis and practical advice for scaling operations. Instead, she told the truth. 12 years ago, Serafina began, I married a man who ran a criminal empire. I was young, idealistic, convinced that love would be enough to build a meaningful life. And for a while I convinced myself it was working. I used my intelligence to structure his business operations. I used my social skills to build connections. I used everything I had to make him successful. The audience was silent, and in return, I became invisible. My accomplishments became his accomplishments. My intelligence became helpful support. My partnership became standing behind a powerful man. I spent 12 years shrinking myself to fit into someone else's empire while telling myself I was building something meaningful. She paused, letting the words settle. Then one night, I overheard my husband tell his associate that I was useful, that I handled the boring stuff, that I always came crawling back. And I realized something terrifying. I'd become complicit in my own erasure. I'd accepted being useful instead of demanding to be valued. I'd settled for visibility through him instead of insisting on visibility in my own right. Serafina looked out at the audience, seeing women lean forward, recognizing themselves in her story. What came next was ugly, painful, expensive. My marriage collapsed. My husband's empire fell apart. I cooperated with federal investigations. I lost almost everything I'd built. People threatened me. My business burned. My best friend betrayed me. I spent 6 months fighting for survival in ways I never imagined I'd need to. But I survived, she continued, her voice strengthening, and then I rebuilt. Not by finding another man to stand behind, not by attaching myself to someone else's success, but by building my own empire from absolute zero. Slowly, painfully. One decision at a time, one property at a time, one choice to keep going instead of surrender. She gestured to the screen behind her, where images of her hotels appeared. These buildings represent more than business success. They represent proof that you can lose everything and still rebuild, that you can be underestimated, dismissed, erased, and still force the world to see you clearly, that your value isn't determined by whose arm you're on or whose empire you support. Your value is inherent, undeniable, yours. The applause started quietly, then built like a wave. I'm not going to tell you it's easy, Serafina said. It's not. Rebuilding is harder than building the first time because you carry the weight of everything you lost. But you also carry the wisdom of survival, The knowledge that you've already been through the worst and you're still standing. That's power nobody can take from you. She paused, feeling tears threaten but refusing to let them fall. So if you're in a marriage that diminishes you, leave. If you're in a career that erases you, quit. If you're in any situation where being useful is considered sufficient, walk away. Because you're not useful, you're remarkable, you're powerful, you're everything, and you deserve an empire built on your own terms. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Afterward, dozens of women approached her with stories that echoed her own. Marriages to powerful men who treated them like accessories. Careers where their intelligence was valued but never credited. Situations where they'd learned to shrink themselves to fit someone else's vision. Serafina listened to every story, gave every piece of advice she could, and felt something shift inside herself. She thought her story was about failure and survival, but it was actually about transformation. About refusing to accept erasure. About learning that the only empire worth building was one where you stood at the center instead of the margins. That night, Serafina stood on the rooftop of her original Brooklyn hotel, the one that had started everything. Below, the neighborhood buzzed with life. Artist studios glowed with creative energy. Restaurants served food to people who'd found community here. The hotel itself was fully booked, its success spawning imitators across Brooklyn's industrial waterfront. She'd built this. Not Dante. Not any man. Her. Adrian appeared beside her, bringing wine and the comfortable silence of someone who understood when words weren't necessary. "Good speech today," he said eventually. "Thank you." "Mean it. You told the truth. That takes courage." Serafina looked out over Brooklyn, seeing her reflection in glass buildings and steel structures. "I spent so long hiding the truth. Pretending my marriage was fine, pretending I was happy supporting someone else's dreams, pretending I didn't know exactly what Dante was doing. The lies were exhausting." "So you stopped lying." "I stopped pretending," Serafina corrected. "There's a difference. Lies are what you tell other people. Pretending is what you tell yourself. I stopped pretending I was okay with being invisible, and everything else followed from that." Adrian touched her hand gently. "For what it's worth, I see you. Clearly. Completely. And what I see is remarkable." Serafina felt something warm bloom in her chest. Not the desperate, consuming love she'd felt for Dante, but something steadier, calmer, built on actual partnership instead of need. "I'm thinking about expanding internationally," she said, changing the subject because the vulnerability felt too raw. "London, maybe, or Paris. Markets where the Moretti brand could translate." "Ambitious." "Always," Serafina agreed. They stood together watching the city breathe, two people who'd found each other in the aftermath of different disasters and were building something new together. Not perfect, not without complications, but real, honest, built on the foundation that both of them had learned hard lessons about what love required and what it cost. Serafina's phone buzzed. Message from her attorney. "Dante's up for parole review next month. His attorney asked if you'd be willing to provide a character statement. No pressure. I told them you probably wouldn't, but wanted you to know." Serafina stared at the message for a long time. Dante had served 8 years, would serve more, would probably die in prison given his age and the enemies he'd made through cooperation. She could help him, could write a letter supporting parole, could acknowledge the sacrifice he'd made to ensure her safety. Or she could do nothing, could let him face the consequences of his choices without her intervention. Could finally, completely close that chapter. "What's wrong?" Adrian asked, noticing her expression. "Dante's up for parole," Serafina said. "They want me to write a support letter." "Will you?" "I don't know." She looked at Adrian. "What would you do?" "I'd ask myself what I owed him versus what I owed myself," Adrian said carefully. "And I'd remember that forgiveness isn't the same as obligation. You can forgive someone without saving them." Serafina nodded slowly. That night, she wrote a letter. Not to the parole board, to Dante. "I heard you're up for review. I won't be writing a support letter, not because I hate you or want you to suffer, but because your freedom isn't my responsibility. You made choices that led to prison. I made choices that led to survival. We're both living with the consequences. I hope you find peace. I hope you learn the lessons that prison teaches. I hope when you eventually get out, you're different than the man who went in.
But my role in your story is finished. I'm building my own now, and it doesn't include saving people from themselves. Be well. S. She sent it before she could second-guess the decision. It wasn't cruelty, it was boundaries. The final act of separation between who she'd been and who she'd become. 2 weeks later, she received a response. I understand. Thank you for your honesty. Congratulations on everything you've built. You are always going to be extraordinary. I'm just sorry I couldn't see it clearly enough to deserve you. I won't contact you again. This is goodbye. Take care of yourself. Serafina read the letter once, then filed it away in the folder with all the other pieces of her past she'd survived and moved beyond. Then she returned to work, because that was what she did. Build, survive, refuse to quit. One decision at a time. One property at a time. One day at a time. Creating an empire built entirely on her own terms. Standing at the center instead of the margins. Visible, valued, free. And finally, after 12 years of being useful, 6 months of being destroyed, and 8 years of being rebuilt, she was exactly who she'd always been meant to be. Someone remarkable, someone powerful, someone who'd learned that the greatest empire you could ever build was the one that required no one's permission except your own. The city glittered around her like scattered stars, beautiful and brutal and filled with possibility. And Serafina Moretti stood in the middle of it all, completely herself, completely free, and completely unstoppable.